So how many pairs of cranial nerves do we have? How many pairs? And how many pairs of spinal nerves do we have? How many pairs of spinal nerves? How many pairs of spinal nerves? How many pairs of spinal nerves? 31. Cervical pair 8. Cervical are. Why I am telling this? Because you tend to forget this. ये question पूछा गया था कितने cervical vertebra होते हैं, लोगों ने 8 मार्क कर दिया. कितने cervical nerves होते हैं, लोगों ने 7 मार्क कर दिया. ठीक है, तो cervical vertebra are 7. Cervical vertebra are, but cervical nerves are thoracic 12, thoracic, lumbar, sacral 5, sacral, coccygeal. The total pair of spinal nerves are, whereas total pair of cranial nerves are 12. Total pair of cranial nerves are 12 in number. If I talk about the vertebrae, how many total vertebrae do we have? 33. How many total vertebrae? Cervical are 7. Cervical are. Thoracic are 12. These thoracic vertebrae are also called as dorsal vertebrae. So don't get confused. Okay? So lumbar are 5. Lumbar are. Sacral are 5. Sacral are. Coccygeal are. Yeah? Nerve. Coccygeal nerve is 1. Coccygeal vertebra are 3 to 5. On an average, you can write 4. So the total number, गिन लो यार, 33 करने के लिए लिखा है, तो किसी में कम किसी में ज्यादा होगा. 3 to 5 is the coccygeal number. ठीक है, on an average we write 4. ठीक है, so please remember total vertebrae are 33 in number. Now if I talk about the cranial nerve, so these cranial nerves, why they are called as cranial nerves? Because they arise from the brain. They have their nuclei inside the brain. That is important. ठीक है, so first cranial nerve that you can see. और थोड़ा cadaveric images देख लो. This is important because nowadays in the exams they are putting cadaveric images. ठीक है, so search for cadaveric images of anatomy. Last time epiglottis they marked in a cadaver. ठीक है, so that is important to know the cadaveric images. So the first nerve that you can see beneath the frontal lobe, this first cranial nerve is known as the olfactory. First cranial nerve is known as an olfactory nerve is responsible for olfaction. Olfactory nerve is responsible for olfaction means smell sensation. Important points about olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerve is the smallest cranial nerve. Olfactory nerve is the smallest, shortest. The better term to be remembered is the shortest cranial nerve. In length wise, the shortest cranial nerve is olfactory nerve. It is responsible for olfaction. Now, please let me know the olfactory neurons, which will carry the smell sensation. They are which type of neurons, anybody? They are which type of neurons, I am asking. Definitely sensory neurons, but which type? Unipolar, pseudo-unipolar, bipolar, which type of neurons? Olfactory neurons are bipolar neurons. And these bipolar olfactory neurons pass to the brain via the cribriform plate. याद रखना. Important things about olfactory nerve. Next, if I talk about the other nerve, which you can see behind the olfactory nerve, and it is crossing. So only nerve which crosses is known as the second cranial nerve is known as optic nerve. Has 2 fibers, the nasal fibers and the temporal fibers. And I hope all of you are quite aware from ophthalmology. In eye we have cross innervation. That means the nasal fibers are responsible for temporal vision. And temporal fibers responsible for and nasal fibers responsible for temporal vision. Okay, so these optic nerve usually crosses. Okay, this optic nerve usually crosses at the level of sella turcica. It crosses at the level of sella, and at sella turcica we have a gland known as pituitary gland. In the sella turcica we have a gland known as pituitary gland. So any abnormal pathology, we'll discuss that. Any pathology of the pituitary gland, that means the pituitary adenoma, will compress which part of the optic nerve? It will compress the optic chiasma. It will compress the optic chiasma. And optic chiasma, please let me know, at optic chiasma, which fibers will cross? The nasal, the temporal, both the fibers. So at optic chiasma, which fibers cross? The optic chiasma, which fibers cross? The nasal fibers cross at the optic chiasma. Which fibers cross at optic chiasma? Which fibers cross at optic chiasma? Which fibers cross at optic chiasma? Whereas temporal fibers go their own way. Right side wala right mein jayega, left side wala left mein jayega. Only which fibers cross? The nasal fibers. As the nasal fibers cross at optic chiasma, so when there is optic chiasma compression, which vision will be affected? By temporal vision is affected. Which vision is affected? By temporal vision. Because we know in eye there is cross innervation. Nasal fibers affected to temporal vision loss. No issues with this. Yaad rakhna. Which fibers cross? The nasal fibers cross at optic chiasma. So optic nerve is responsible for vision. Optic nerve is responsible for vision. Then the nerve that you can see behind the optic nerve, this nerve which arises, it is known as the third cranial nerve, also known as oculomotor nerve. It is known as the oculomotor nerve. And oculomotor nerve is responsible for movement of eyeball. Oculomotor nerve is responsible for movement of oculomotor nerve is responsible for movement of, because it innervates which muscles? The oculomotor nerve innervates the extraocular muscles. Okay, the oculomotor nerve innervates the and these extraocular muscles are known to cause movement of the eyeball. Except, important, all extraocular muscles are innervated by the third cranial nerve or the oculomotor nerve, except for LR6 SO4. So total how many extraocular muscles do we have? 7. Total how many extraocular muscles? There are 4 recti. Superior rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus. Superior oblique, inferior oblique, and one. It is LPS, that is levator palpebrae superioris. It is responsible for elevation of the eyelid. It is responsible for elevation of the upper eyelid, and therefore LPS, levator palpebrae superioris, is also called as a eye opener muscle. LPS is also called as a eye opener muscle. Which muscle is called as eye opener? LPS. All the extraocular muscles are innervated by which nerve? Third cranial nerve or the oculomotor nerve, except for LR6 SO4. Lateral rectus by 6th cranial nerve. Superior oblique by 4th cranial nerve. Okay, no issues with that. Next, if I say behind the oculomotor nerve, okay, so you can see all the cranial nerves are arising from the ventral aspect. All the cranial nerves are arising from the ventral aspect. There is one cranial nerve which arises from the dorsal aspect. पीछे से आगे आ रही है. Right? So the one cranial nerve which arises from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem or the posterior aspect of the brainstem. This is what is your 4th cranial nerve known as the. So this question was asked. Which cranial nerve arises from dorsal aspect of brainstem? Answer is. Which cranial nerve arises from dorsal aspect of brainstem? Answer is trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve is which number? 4th cranial nerve. And trochlear nerve will innervate which muscle? Trochlear nerve will innervate superior oblique. Trochlear nerve will innervate superior oblique. And superior oblique के function क्या होता है? Abed. So abed is the mnemonic ना? So abed. AB for abduction. AB for abduction. I for intorsion. And D for depression. So please remember, trochlear nerve innervates which muscle of the eyeball? Superior oblique muscle. Functions of superior oblique? Abed. AB for abduction, I for intorsion, and D for depression. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, if I say 2 important points about trochlear, again you need to remember. First, innervation is superior oblique, and second, it arises from the dorsal aspect. Important चीजें याद रखनी, हर एक चीज याद नहीं रखनी होती है anatomy. Next, if I say about this one, the thickest cranial nerve that you can see over here. Okay, the thickest cranial nerve which has 3 branches. This is known as the Fifth cranial nerve known as the fifth cranial nerve is the fifth cranial nerve is the important point. Trigeminal nerve is the thickest cranial nerve. Trigeminal nerve is the which is the thickest cranial nerve? Which is the thickest cranial nerve? Trigeminal nerve. And it has how many branches? It has mainly 3 branches or 3 divisions. These 3 divisions of fifth cranial nerve or the trigeminal nerve are remembered as V1, V2 and V3. V1 is ophthalmic division. V1 is V2 is maxillary. V2 is and V3 is mandibular. V3 is, please remember, the trigeminal nerve is responsible for carrying sensation from the face. It is responsible for carrying sensation from the face. 3 branches. Eyeball to ophthalmic division, maxillary division and the mandibular division. Okay, 3 branches of trigeminal nerve. Ophthalmic division, maxillary division and the mandibular division. And therefore it is the thickest cranial nerve. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. And please remember, trigeminal nerve has multiple nuclei. Okay, trigeminal nerve has multiple nuclei. ठीक है, बाकी cranial nerve के usually single nuclei होते हैं, but trigeminal nerve has multiple nuclei. ठीक है, one of the trigeminal nerve nuclei is also located in the midbrain. One trigeminal nuclei is located in the midbrain, whereas rest are located in the pons. One in the midbrain, one nuclei in the rest in the pons. Rest in the pons. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, मैं nuclei बताता हूँ. Next, if I talk about this, after the thickest nerve, you can see at the pontomedullary junction. This is the pontomedullary junction. At the pontomedullary junction, on the medial side, you can see a nerve arising. So on the medial pontomedullary junction, which nerve arises? The sixth cranial nerve known as sixth cranial nerve is known as abducens nerve. And abducens nerve is known to innervate which muscle? Abducens nerve. अभी तो बात करी LR6 SO4. It innervates the lateral rectus. Abducens innervates the lateral rectus muscle. No issues with this. It causes abduction of the eyeball. Next, if I talk about the pontomedullary junction, but on the lateral side. Pontomedullary junction, but on the lateral side. We have the seventh cranial nerve. And the seventh cranial nerve is known as the facial nerve. Facial nerve will innervate the muscles of the face. Facial nerve will innervate the muscles of the face. So facial nerve innervates which muscle? Facial nerve is a mixed type of nerve, right? It innervates the facial muscles and causes facial expression. So facial expressions are given by the facial muscles, and these facial muscles are innervated by the facial nerve. Along with that, facial nerve is known to innervate 3 glands. It is known to innervate 3 glands. Which glands, anybody? Submandibular gland, sublingual gland, and third is the lacrimal gland. So इतनी important चीजें याद रखनी है, ठीक है? So, which muscles are innervated by the facial nerve? Facial muscles. Which muscles are innervated by facial nerve? Which glands are innervated? First is the, second is the, and third is the lacrimal gland. And it is also known to carry sensation. Mixed है ना? That means it will have a motor function as well as the sensory function. So motor function तो बता दिया मैंने, the facial muscle innervation, but the sensory function, it carries taste sensation from the tongue. कौन सा aspect of tongue we will discuss, ठीक है? Anterior 2/3 of the tongue by the branch known as chorda tympani nerve. And facial nerve is also known to innervate the smallest muscle of the body. Very good. Facial nerve innervates the stapedius muscle. Facial nerve innervates the, and which is the smallest muscle of body? Smallest bone of body is stapes. And the smallest muscle is stapedius. And this stapedius is innervated by the facial nerve. No issues with this. Next, if I move further, talking about the next nerve, which also arises from the lateral aspect of the pontomedullary junction. This is your 8th cranial nerve, and the 8th cranial nerve is known as Very good. 8th cranial nerve is known as vestibulocochlear nerve. 8th cranial nerve is known as vestibulocochlear nerve, which is responsible for 8th cranial nerve is responsible for vestibulocochlear nerve is responsible for hearing. के लिए which nerve is responsible? Vestibulocochlear. It has how many divisions? Anybody? Vestibulocochlear nerve has how many divisions? Important. ये ENT से भी important है. Very good. It has 3 divisions. First is the cochlear division. First is the cochlear division. Second is the superior vestibular. Second is the superior vestibular. And third is the inferior vestibular. So how many divisions does the vestibulocochlear nerve have? 3. First is, second is superior vestibular. Second is, and third is inferior vestibular. Third is inferior vestibular. Now please let me know, usually this vestibulocochlear nerve and the facial nerve passes from which meatus? It passes from the internal acoustic meatus. So the 7th cranial nerve and the 8th cranial nerve passes via the internal acoustic meatus, also known as internal auditory canal. Okay? So 7th and 8th cranial nerve passes via internal auditory canal, also known as internal acoustic meatus. It usually has this kind of a feature. If you take a cross section, this kind of a feature is seen. Okay? So the cochlear division and the inferior vestibular division passes beneath, and the superior vestibular and the facial nerve passes above. So the division in between these two branches, the facial nerve and the superior vestibular division, this bony septum which is present, this bony septum is called as which bar? Bill's bar. This bony septum is called as the Bill's bar. The bony septum in internal acoustic meatus is called as the bony septum in the internal acoustic meatus is called as the Bill's bar. No issues with this, anybody? Important thing about. Next, if I talk about the 9th cranial nerve, which arises from the lateral aspect of the pons. Okay, 9th cranial nerve arising from the lateral aspect of the pons only. Okay, pontomedullary junction you can say. Okay, so this 9th cranial nerve is known as the 9th cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal nerve. 9th cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, important. 9th cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal nerve. And glossopharyngeal nerve is again a mixed type of nerve. It will carry taste sensation from. It will carry sensation from which part of tongue? It will carry posterior 1/3 of tongue. Which part of tongue? General sensation and taste sensation from the posterior 1/3 of tongue is carried by the. It is carried by the glossopharyngeal nerve. It is carried by the glossopharyngeal nerve. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. And it glossopharyngeal nerve का important feature है. It only innervates one muscle, and that is the very good. It innervates the stylopharyngeus muscle. It innervates the stylopharyngeus muscle. All other pharyngeal muscles are innervated by. All other pharyngeal muscles are innervated by anybody. So all these can come as one-liners, no? All other pharyngeal muscles are innervated by. Tongue muscle by the 12th cranial nerve, hypoglossal. All other pharyngeal muscles are innervated by the 11th cranial nerve. That is your accessory nerve. Which part? Cranial or spinal? The cranial part. Yaad rakhna. So please remember, all other pharyngeal muscles are innervated by the 11th cranial nerve. All other pharyngeal muscles by the 11th cranial nerve, except the stylopharyngeus. And stylopharyngeus is innervated by glossopharyngeal. And glossopharyngeal is also known to innervate one gland, one muscle, one gland. So one muscle of stylopharyngeus, one gland is parotid gland. Which nerve? Important question is अब one-liner से last year के मैं बस important चीजें बता रहा. So glossopharyngeal nerve innervates the parotid gland, but which cranial nerve passes within the parotid gland? Which nerve passes within the parotid gland? Facial nerve. Which nerve passes within the parotid gland? But it does not innervate the parotid gland. Okay? So I love you, but as a friend wala phenomenon. Okay? So it passes via the parotid gland, but does not innervate the parotid gland, the facial nerve. Okay? Innervation of parotid gland is by the 9th cranial nerve. No issues with this. Next is the 10th cranial nerve. So this 10th cranial nerve that you can see, It is known as the vagus nerve. 10th cranial nerve is the important feature about vagus nerve. It is the longest cranial nerve. Longest extracranial course is vagus nerve का ही. Okay, longest extracranial course also vagus nerve. ठीक है, because वो कहाँ से पास होती है? Cranium से आके it passes usually throughout the abdomen. ठीक है, so it is the vagus nerve because vagus nerve will give innervation to the GIT, heart and the lungs. It will give innervation to the GIT, heart and the lungs. Which kind of innervation? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? So vagus nerve gives parasympathetic innervation. Vagus nerve gives to which structures? GIT, heart, lungs. Which structure? GIT, heart, lungs. Vagus nerve कौन सा innervation देती है? Parasympathetic innervation. No issues with that, and it is the longest cranial nerve. Next, if I talk about the 11th cranial nerve, as you can see, it is formed from two parts. One is coming from the brain, the other one is coming from the spinal cord. So this cranial nerve, which is formed from two parts, is known as the accessory nerve. 11th cranial nerve is the spinal नहीं बोल सकते तुम, accessory nerve बोलो because it has two parts, cranial part as well as the spinal part. Okay, so 11th cranial nerve is the accessory nerve. 11th cranial nerve is the it has two parts, spinal as well as the cranial part. Spinal and the cranial part. Now please tell me accessory nerve, important. The spinal part of accessory nerve innervates two muscles of the neck. Which are those? ये question है सबके सब. Cranial nerve is a very important topic of anatomy. ठीक है, हर बार question mostly आता है directly or indirectly, क्योंकि उनके पास वही है पूछने. Accessory nerve, 11th cranial nerve, accessory nerve, spinal part gives innervation to which two neck muscles? Cool. Very good. Trapezius and sternocleidomastoid. So which two muscles receive innervation from the accessory nerve? Trapezius and sternocleidomastoid and so trapezius and sternocleidomastoid receives innervation from which nerve? SPM and trapezius receives innervation from the spinal accessory nerve. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, important. And the cranial accessory nerve, as I told you, it will innervate which muscle? Pharyngeal muscles. It will innervate which muscle? So cranial part will innervate two muscles, the pharyngeal muscles and the palatal muscles. Which muscle? Pharyngeal and palatal and ठीक है, palatal and pharyngeal ठीक है, तो याद रखना. And the last cranial nerve, the 12th cranial nerve is which passes from the medial side of the medulla. The 12th cranial nerve passes from the medial side of the medulla. It is known as your hypoglossal nerve. 12th cranial nerve is the and it is innervates the 12th cranial nerve innervates the tongue muscle. 12th cranial nerve innervates the so movement of tongue is caused by hypoglossal nerve. ठीक है, no issues. Glossus जिसमें भी आएगा वो tongue muscles हो गई. Genioglossus, hyoglossus, palatoglossus. Okay, so these muscles are usually innervated by the hypoglossal nerve. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, important. Now please tell me, first and second are pure sensory, pure motor or mixed nerve? First and second are pure sensory nerve. First and second are pure. Third, fourth are pure motor, pure sensory or mixed nerve. Third and fourth are pure motor nerve. Third and fourth are pure. Fifth is a sensory, motor or mixed nerve. So trigeminal is a mixed nerve. वो इसमें अगर क्वेश्चन पूछे, उनका मन करे कि which of the trigeminal nerve is usually a sensory nerve. The ophthalmic division and the maxillary division are sensory division. The only mixed division is the mandibular division. Only mixed division of trigeminal is the no issues with this, याद रखना. Then 7th and 8th are pure sensory, pure motor or mixed nerve. Sorry, 7th is a pure sensory, pure motor or mixed nerve. 7th. So facial is a mixed nerve. Then 8th, that is your vestibulocochlear nerve, is a pure motor or sensory, motor or mixed. 8th cranial nerve is a sensory nerve. 8th cranial nerve is a sensory nerve. 9, 10th, 11th, anybody? 9, 10th, 11th are mixed nerve. 9, 10th, 11th are usually mixed nerve. ठीक है? 12th is a motor nerve. 12th is a motor nerve. ठीक है? 11th को भी तुम motor ही बोलोगे because it does not carry any sensation. So 11th and 10th are usually motor nerve. 11th and 10th are usually, sorry, 11th and 12th are usually motor nerve. ठीक है? No issues with this. Important है. Next, important topic. ये इनसे बोर होते हो और यही क्वेश्चन आता है एग्जाम. ठीक है? So talking about the skull foramina. These skull foramina are present at the skull base, and via these foramina multiple structures pass. ठीक है? So important वाले देख लो. First, the anterior most foramen that you can see, that is the optic canal. The anterior most foramen is the optic canal, and via optic canal it is easy. All the optic structures is pass. That is the optic nerve and the ophthalmic. Which structures pass by optic canal? Optic nerve and which nerve passes by optic canal? Which artery passes by optic canal? Which artery? Which canal? Then behind the optic canal you can see there is the superior orbital fissure. Behind the optic canal there is a superior orbital fissure. Via the superior orbital fissure, what will pass? The third, fourth and the fifth cranial nerve. Which cranial nerve? The third, fourth and the fifth cranial nerve. That is your oculomotor, trochlear and the trigeminal and sixth also. Okay, so third, fourth, fifth and sixth cranial nerve. So oculomotor, trochlear, of the trigeminal and the abducens nerve. Trigeminal के only one branch passes. Obviously, आंखों से related है, so the ophthalmic division will pass. And last is the superior ophthalmic vein. So they will not ask you the vein, they will only play with the nerves mainly over here. ठीक है, क्योंकि वो confusing है. So which nerve passes by the superior orbital fissure? 3, 4, 5 and 6. Which nerve passes by the superior orbital fissure? 3, 4, 5 and 6. ठीक है, all related to eye. जितने भी आंखों से related nerves है, वो passes by the superior orbital fissure. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, if I go behind the superior orbital fissure, here you can see a circular foramen, and this circular foramen is known as the foramen rotundum. Circular foramen is known as foramen. Circular foramen behind the surface is known as foramen, and this foramen rotundum. Via the foramen rotundum, which nerve passes? Maxillary nerve. Which nerve passes? And maxillary nerve is the branch of trigeminal nerve. Maxillary nerve is the second branch of. Maxillary nerve is the second branch of. And this maxillary nerve passes via foramen. Maxillary nerve passes by foramen. ठीक है, foramen rotundum. Next is the foramen ovale. Behind it, the circular foramen के पीछे oval foramen है. And this oval foramen is known as foramen ovale. Foramen ovale से क्या पास होता है? Male. Foramen ovale से पास होता है? Male. Foramen ovale से पास होता है? Male. M से जाता है mandibular nerve. M is for the trigeminal nerve, easy. Superior orbital fissure, next foramen rotundum and the foramen ovale. ठीक है? So M से A for accessory meningeal artery. A for accessory meningeal artery. L for lesser petrosal nerve. And E for the emissary vein. तो जल्दी से. The structures passing via the foramen ovale are remembered as male. They are remembered as male. M for mandibular nerve. A for accessory meningeal artery. A for accessory meningeal artery. L for lesser petrosal nerve. And E for emissary vein. No issues with this. Next, if I talk about the other foramen, which is adjacent to the foramen ovale. Adjacent to the foramen ovale is the foramen lacerum. Adjacent to the foramen ovale is the foramen. थोड़ा irregular सा होता है shape में, ठीक है? So that is what is your foramen lacerum. And which structure passes by the foramen lacerum? फोरामेन lacerum से पास होता है, तो कैरोटिड कैनल से क्या पास होगा जरा बताइए? वो क्या होता है पता है? It is the sympathetic plexus to the internal carotid artery. रटा क्या हमने? Carotid artery. तो कैरोटिड कैनाल से क्या पास होता है फिर? तो Please remember, it is not the carotid artery, it is the sympathetic plexus of the internal carotid artery. Important to be remembered, actually, these are the important to be remembered for foramen lacerum is the nerve of anybody. Nerve and vessel of pterygoid canal. Nerve and vessel of pterygoid. Nerve and vessel of pterygoid. Nerve and vessel of pterygoid. So which nerve passes by foramen lacerum? Which nerve passes by foramen lacerum? Which nerve passes by foramen lacerum? Nerve of pterygoid canal. Nerve of pterygoid. Nerve of pterygoid canal is also known as. ये पढ़ा है तुमने? Nerve of pterygoid canal. All those online. Nerve of pterygoid canal. ये तो तुम बताओगे मुझे. Nerve of pterygoid canal. अरे भाई vasomotor rhinitis में कट करते हो वो nerve. Median nervectomy is done. So nerve of pterygoid canal is median nerve. Nerve of pterygoid canal is the nerve of pterygoid canal is the, and this nerve of pterygoid canal or the median nerve passes by which foramen? It passes by foramen. Median nerve passes by foramen, and median nervectomy is done in which condition? Vasomotor rhinitis. Median nervectomy is done in which condition? Vasomotor rhinitis. ये FMGE का recall question है. Okay, please remember vasomotor rhinitis में which nerve is cut? It is known as the nerve of pterygoid canal or the median nerve. No issues with this. Next, as you can see, behind the foramen lacerum there is the carotid canal, and easy by the name it is. तो पहले carotid canal से पहले जाते हैं इस पे. So the structure adjacent to it is the foramen spinosum. Structure adjacent to foramen lacerum is the foramen spinosum. And foramen spinosum से क्या क्या पास होता है? So M3 to be remembered. Okay, what passes by foramen spinosum? What passes by foramen spinosum? First is the middle meningeal artery. First is the middle meningeal artery. Second is the middle meningeal vein. Second is the middle meningeal vein. And third is the meningeal branch of mandibular nerve. Third is the meningeal branch of mandibular nerve. So all M pass by foramen. All M pass by foramen. All M pass by foramen. ठीक है, foramen spinosum. 3 M pass by foramen spinosum. First is middle meningeal artery. Second is middle meningeal vein, and third is meningeal branch of mandibular nerve. No issues with this. Behind the foramen spinosum we have the carotid canal. Behind the foramen spinosum we have the carotid canal. Easy. Through it there would be passage of internal carotid artery and its nerve plexus. By carotid canal क्या पास होगा? Internal carotid artery and the nerve plexus. Next, if I talk about this, internal acoustic meatus. Okay, beneath the carotid canal we have the internal acoustic meatus. As I told you, which two cranial nerves pass by the internal acoustic meatus or the internal auditory canal? The 7th and the 8th cranial nerve. Which two nerves pass by internal acoustic meatus? 7th and 8th. That is facial and vestibulocochlear and facial nerve pass by which meatus? Internal acoustic meatus. Also we have one artery that is known as the labyrinthine artery. Labyrinth किसको बोलते हैं? Dead ear को labyrinth बोलेंगे या dead labyrinth बोलेंगे? Inner ear को. So the labyrinthine artery will supply the inner ear. Important. ठीक है, याद रखो. So which artery passes by the internal acoustic meatus? Labyrinthine artery. And which two nerves? 7th and 8th cranial nerve. Behind that, it is easy now. ठीक है, behind that ovoid foramen. Okay, लंबा सा lengthy foramen दिखेगा. That is jugular foramen. Okay, तो foramen सबसे बड़ा foramen कौन सा होता है? ये तो पता ही होगा. The biggest foramen is foramen magnum. The biggest foramen is foramen magnum. Just to adjacent to it, we have a oval foramen. Just to adjacent to it, we have a lengthened or oval foramen. That is what is called as the jugular foramen. क्यों? क्योंकि वो मोस्टली ऊपर वालों में कंफ्यूज हो सकते हो, तो शायद FMG में ना पूछे, बट जुगुलर फोरामेन वो पहले भी पूछ चुके हैं, बिकॉज इट इज इजी टू आइडेंटिफाई. ठीक है, सो एडजेसेंट टू फोरामेन मैग्नम वी हैव द जुगुलर फोरामेन. एंड व्हिच स्ट्रक्चर्स पास बाय जुगुलर फोरामेन? व्हिच nerve? First 9, 10, 11 cranial nerve. Which cranial nerve pass by jugular foramen? 9, 10, 11. Which cranial nerve? 9, 10, 11. 9th is the Glossopharyngeal nerve. 10th is the vagus nerve. And 11th is the accessory nerve. 11th is the accessory nerve. All of these pass via the jugular foramen. Which sinus? Sinus means a vein. ठीक है? Inferior petrosal sinus. Which sinus? Inferior petrosal sinus. And which artery? Posterior meningeal artery. Which artery? Posterior meningeal artery. Important है, एक तो nerve याद रखना और दूसरा ये structure याद रखना. Most important. ठीक है? So sigmoid sinus passes via the jugular foramen. Sigmoid sinus passes via the. Why it is important to remember sigmoid sinus? Because it is the main venous drainage of the brain. It is the main venous drainage of the brain. ठीक है? And this sigmoid sinus will terminate into internal jugular vein. It will terminate into internal jugular vein. And the junction of sigmoid sinus and internal jugular vein is called as the jugular bulb. It is called as the jugular bulb. A tumor of the jugular bulb is known as glomus jugulare. Tumor of jugular bulb is known as glomus jugulare. Rising sun sign, bleeding mass. क्या हो गया ये एंटी में तुम्हारा? ऐसे ही एंटी नहीं चलेगा भाई. Then just beneath, just adjacent to the foramen magnum, we have a small opening known as the hypoglossal canal. By the name it is evident. Which nerve passes by hypoglossal canal? Hypoglossal nerve. Number 12 cranial nerve. And foramen magnum से जल्दी बता दो. Which structures pass? First is the medulla oblongata. So via foramen magnum, medulla oblongata passes and it continues beneath as the spinal cord. Then next, one pair of vertebral artery. One pair of number 2. दो vertebral arteries होती है, एक pair होता है. So don't get confused. ठीक है? So one pair or 2 vertebral arteries pass via the foramen magnum. And which nerve roots? The spinal nerve roots of the 11th cranial nerve and the spinal nerve roots of the accessory nerve. So कौन सी nerve? Spinal accessory. Which nerve? Which two arteries? Vertebral artery. Which two arteries? And medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata goes downwards or upwards? Medulla oblongata goes downwards, but the nerves and arteries will go upwards. And these two vertebral arteries will combine to form a basilar artery. Two vertebral arteries will combine to form a basilar artery. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. ये basilar artery या circle of Willis important not only from the anatomical point of view, guys. It is also important from stroke and CVS in medicine. ठीक है? अगर ये नहीं पता तो मैं stroke और CVS नहीं पता चलने वाले. Important चीज एटलीस्ट ब्रांचेस याद रख लो और कौन सा किस सिंड्रोम में डैमेज होता है वो देखते हैं अभी. ठीक है? Next, if I talk about this, यहाँ पे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं याद रखना है. Here, the anterior most, you can see the ethmoid bone के दो parts है. Okay? Here you can see the ethmoid bone on the anterior inferior surface has two parts. The bony septum is called as crista galli. The bony septum is called as crista. And the perforated plate is known as and which neurons pass by the cribriform plate? Olfactory neurons. Which neurons pass by cribriform plate? Olfactory neurons. Okay. So important अभी जल्दी बता दो मुझे cranial nerve का. Shortest cranial nerve. Olfactory. Shortest cranial nerve. Longest cranial nerve. Thinnest cranial nerve. शाबाश. Thinnest cranial nerve is thinnest of slender पूछेंगे वो. Thinnest of slender cranial nerve is trochlear. Okay, trochlear nerve. No important, no issues with this. Thickest cranial nerve. Largest cranial nerve. Trigeminal. Longest नहीं पूछा मैंने, largest पूछा. ये इंग्लिश के साथ खेलेंगे तुम्हारी, याद रखना. Largest is thickest. So largest cranial nerve, trigeminal. Largest cranial nerve, longest vagus. Largest trigeminal. Thickest trigeminal. Thinnest vagus. Thinnest trochlear. Longest intracranial course किसका होता है? Longest intracranial. I am talking about longest intracranial. Vagus has the longest extracranial course. दिमाग skull के बाहर वो लंबी होती है. Within the brain, which is the longest one? So longest intracranial course. Longest intracranial course. Longest bony course अगर पूछा होता मैंने तो तुम्हारा आंसर सही था. Longest bony course is the facial nerve. Longest bony course is the very good. All of you. It is the trochlear nerve. Longest intracranial course. Longest intracranial course. Longest intracranial course. Longest intracranial course. Longest extracranial course. Vagus nerve. Longest bony course. ठीक है. Last. Longest extradural course, anybody? Sorry. Longest intradural course. Extradural नहीं, intradural. Longest intradural course, abducens nerve. Longest intradural course, longest intradural course, abducens nerve. Longest intradural course, abducens nerve. Therefore, the first nerve to be affected and raised intracranial pressure, abducens nerve. The first nerve to be affected and raised ICP. First nerve to be affected and raised ICP. First now to be affected and raised ICP, abducens nerve. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, याद रखना. Next, if I talk about this pink structure, this pink bone is which bone? Anybody? Pink bone is the sphenoid bone. The pink one is the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone has a greater wing and a lesser wing of sphenoid. And the body of sphenoid has a depression called as sella turcica. The body of sphenoid has a depression called as sella, and this sella turcica has a place for pituitary gland, which is called as hypophyseal fossa. So sella turcica has a place for pituitary gland to rest, and this is called as the hypophyseal fossa. Hypophyseal fossa क्यों? क्योंकि pituitary gland is also called as the hypophysis. याद रखना, pituitary gland is also called as the hypophysis. No issues with this. Pituitary gland is also called as the hypophysis, and it rests in which fossa? Hypophyseal fossa. Okay, of the sella turcica. In which bone? Sphenoid bone. No issues with this, anybody? कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Okay, all of these are the foramens. Important है, वो देख लो एक बारी. बस important इतना चीज है. So that what this I wanted to tell you over here. ठीक है, moving further. Now talking about the important surface anatomical features of the brain. ठीक है, याद रखना, वो ज्यादा डीप में जाके ये नहीं पूछने वाले कि क्या होता है, किसका क्या फंक्शन. बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट, तुम्हें सेरेबेलम का फंक्शन पता ही होना चाहिए, तुम्हें सेरेब्रम के फंक्शंस पता ही होने चाहिए, लोब के फंक्शंस पता हो. उसके अलावा बहुत अंदर जाके हिप्पोकैम्पस, लिम्बिक सिस्टम. लिम्बिक सिस्टम का फंक्शन क्या होता है? जनरेशन ऑफ इमोशंस. लिम्बिक सिस्टम का फंक्शन है जनरेशन of emotions is the function of. All of these are one liners which came in previous examination. ठीक है, generation of emotions is by the limbic system, whereas regulation of emotions is by the frontal lobe. So therefore, when there is damage to the frontal lobe, the patient will have personality loss, and he will behave abnormally. So abnormal behavior is seen इसी वजह से. ठीक है, emotions पे काबू नहीं रहता है frontal lobe में, aggressive behavior हो रही है. ठीक है, important ये फंडा है. So here if I talk about the violet color one that you can see, this is the primary motor cortex. This one is the primary motor cortex, whereas behind it is the primary somatosensory cortex. So anteriorly कौन सा cortex होता है? Motor cortex. Anteriorly it is the primary motor cortex, and posteriorly it is the primary somatosensory cortex. No issues with this. जो light in color है, it is the premotor area on the anterior side, and on the posterior side the light green color is the somatosensory association area. On the posterior side it is the somatosensory association area. Important areas का नाम पता हो तुम्हें बस. ठीक है, then the cream color one, it is the prefrontal area. The off white is the prefrontal area. Okay, and posteriorly if I talk about, here you can see the orange one is the visual association area. And the yellow color is the visual cortex. So visual cortex is located in which lobe? Visual cortex and motor cortex and parietal lobe. Motor cortex and mainly parietal lobe, बाकी भी होता है. Okay, so motor cortex in the parietal lobe, sensory cortex in parietal lobe. No issues with this, याद रखो. ठीक है. Then if I talk about these ones, here you can see the dark purplish area. This one is known as the motor speech area. This one is known as the motor speech area, and motor speech area is also known as motor speech area is also known as motor speech area is also known as. So Broca's area number Broca's area number 44, and it is motor speech area. That means it would be responsible for speech or fluency. It would be responsible for speech or fluency. तो जो fluency आती है बोलने में किसकी वजह से आती है? Broca's area, which is also known as the motor speech area. याद रखना, ठीक है. Area number is 44. Next one that you can see over here, the dark green in color, it is the sensory speech area, and this sensory speech area is known as the wernicke area. Sensory speech area is the wernicke area or the sensory speech area helps in understanding or comprehension. जो सामने वाला क्या बोल रहा है ये समझने के लिए कौन सा एरिया होना चाहिए? To understand what the next person is saying. For that we have the sensory speech area known as the, and to speak we have the motor speech area known as the. What is the area number for wernicke? The area number for wernicke is 22 and 39. Wernicke's area is 22 and 39. No issues with this. Now both of these areas, पहले तो location बताओ. Broca's area or motor speech area is located in the inferior temporal gyrus. Broca's area is located in the inferior frontal gyrus. Broca's area is located in the inferior frontal gyrus. Broca's area is located in the inferior frontal gyrus. Whereas wernicke's area is located in the superior, कौन सा दिख रहा है? Lobe. Superior temporal gyrus. Wernicke's area in the superior temporal gyrus. Wernicke's area in the superior temporal gyrus. Important इसमें हम बाकी चीजें भी कवर करेंगे क्योंकि एनाटॉमी बस मार्क करने वाला आजकल नहीं बचा है. ओके, दे विल नॉट डायरेक्टली मार्क एंड आस्क यू. वो पूछेंगे सेंसरी अफेजिया में कौन सा एरिया डैमेज होगा एंड फिर बताना पड़ेगा तुम्हें. ठीक है, तो क्लिनिकल एसोसिएशन ऐसा ही होता है एनाटॉमी का. दे विल आस्क यू द पैथोलॉजी रिलेटेड टू इट. ठीक है, तो इंपॉर्टेंट है. इफ आई से द पेशेंट हैज अ फ्लुएंट अफेजिया, if I say the patient has a fluent aphasia, that means there is damage to the Broca's area. Patient has a fluent aphasia, damage to the Broca's area. Okay, fluent aphasia. Sorry. Okay, non-expressive aphasia, Broca's area. Non-expressive aphasia, sensory aphasia, wernicke's area. Sensory aphasia. Okay, conduction aphasia is due to damage to the. Anybody? Very good. Conduction aphasia is due to damage to the these commissural fibers which connect the Broca's area and the wernicke's area, known as the arcuate fibers or the arcuate fasciculus. Arcuate fibers or arcuate. So the commissural fibers which will connect Broca's and wernicke's are known as the commissural fibers which will connect Broca's and wernicke's are known as the. And if there is damage to the arcuate fasciculus, there would be conduction aphasia. Damage to arcuate fasciculus causes damage to arcuate fasciculus damage to Broca's area causes non-expressive aphasia. Damage to Broca's area causes non-expressive aphasia. And damage to wernicke's area causes sensory aphasia. Damage to wernicke's area causes. So what is the function of arcuate fasciculus? Jaldi se. What would be lost in conduction aphasia? What is lost in conduction aphasia? Important function. Which functions are lost in conduction aphasia? मेरा न्यूरो एनाटॉमी सबसे पहले लेने का मकसद ही यही था because I know you people skip न्यूरो एनाटॉमी. एंड वो नहीं करना है. इजी है, इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें तो याद रख ही सकते हैं हम. बाकी हर एक चीज याद रखने की जरूरत है ही नहीं यार. इंपॉर्टेंट तो याद रखेंगे ना. कंडक्शन एफीजिया में क्या लॉस होगा? व्हाट इज द फंक्शन ऑफ आर्कुएट fasciculus? नेमिंग एंड रेपिटेशन. तो मेरा नाम क्या है ये तुम्हें याद है या फिर तुम मेरे को बोल रहे हो रिपीट कर पा रहे हो? इट इज ड्यू टू द आर्कुएट fasciculus. याद रखना. तो जल्दी से अगर मैं पूछूं non-expressive aphasia due to damage to sensory aphasia due to damage to and conduction aphasia due to damage to naming and repetition is the function of what is the function of arcuate fascicular fluency is the function of and comprehension is the function of wernicke area. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है, मेडिसिन से भी क्वेश्चन आ सकता है, पेपर 1 पेपर 2 बोथ क्वेश्चन आ चुके हैं इस पे, ठीक है. Then next one, the dark green in color that you can see at the insular cortex. Okay, so here at the insular surface, this is the taste area, and the taste cortex is also called as anybody. Taste को हम क्या और बोलते हैं? Sometimes taste would not be an option. Alternative नाम याद होना चाहिए. Gustatory. Taste sensation is also called as the gustatory sensation. Therefore, this is known as the gustatory cortex. Okay, the taste area is also known as the taste area is also known as the and it is located beneath the insula. It is located beneath the insula. Okay, important. Next, you can see over here in the temporal lobe. Okay, in the superior part of the temporal lobe, we have this dark pink in color. It is known as the primary auditory cortex. So, auditory cortex is located in which lobe? Temporal lobe. Auditory cortex and visual cortex and visual cortex and occipital lobe. Gustatory cortex and क्या दिख रहा है? Temporal lobe again. Okay, visual gustatory cortex and कम से कम लोग के ये याद रखते हैं ना, important. And beneath that the light pink area is the auditory association. No issues with this. Important चीजें याद हो गई. So, याद रखना, brain or the cerebral hemisphere is divided into the anterior part and the posterior part by this sulcus, okay, or the depression which is called as the central sulcus. ये एक बार मार्क हुआ था बहुत पहले. What is this? This is the central sulcus. Okay, the central sulcus will divide the cerebral hemisphere into the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. ठीक है, no issues with this. So, anteriorly we have which cortex? Motor cortex, and posteriorly the sensory cortex. तो याद रखना, स्पाइनल कॉर्ड में भी सेम फंडा है, इजी टू रिमेंबर फ्रॉम हियर इटसेल्फ. So the anterior horn cells are motor, anterior horn cells of spinal cord are whereas the posterior or dorsal horn cells of spinal cord are posterior horn cells are याद हो गया, इंपॉर्टेंट, इजी है, इस तरह से दोनों याद रख पाओगे, ठीक है. सेंसरी we will discuss about the tracts. Now please let me know, at collection of cell bodies will lead to a gray matter or a white matter. Collection of cell bodies forms the gray matter. Collection of axons will form the white matter. Collection of cell bodies, ये मैंने भी बोला, अनिका ने भी लिखवाया होगा और अखिलेश सर ने भी बताया होगा. So collection of cell bodies within the CNS is known as nucleus. Collection of cell body within the CNS is collection of cell body within the CNS is collection of cell body outside the CNS is ganglia. Collection of cell body outside the CNS is collection of cell body outside the CNS is collection of axons within the CNS is tracts. Collection of axons within the CNS is tracts. Collection of axons outside the CNS is nerves. Collection of axons outside the CNS is nerves. No issues with this. याद रखना, इंपॉर्टेंट है, यही याद रखना, ठीक है. बिकॉज ये एग्जाम में ना पूछे बट तुम्हें पता होना चाहिए कि एक्चुअली होता क्या है चीज है, ठीक है. तो इससे फंडा क्लियर हो जाता है, तो लॉजिक सही लगता है. And you told me anterior horn cells of spinal cord are motor, posterior horn cells of spinal cord are sensory. Please tell me the lateral horn cells will carry which sensation? Lateral tract or the lateral horn cells will carry which sensation? Pain and temperature. Lateral part will carry and pain and temperature are always ipsilateral or contralateral. Pain and temperature are always. So pain and temperature loss would be always contralateral. Right sided region में left sided loss and left sided region में right sided loss of which function? Pain and temperature due to damage to which tract? Lateral corticospinal tract. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, ये इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है, ये एक्चुअली क्लिनिकल इसमें आएगी. वो रटने वाली एनाटॉमी आजकल नहीं बची है, ठीक है, और वो रटनी है तो तुम घर पे भी रट सकते हो, मेरा कोई मतलब नहीं था इधर आपको, इसीलिए इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें बता रहा हूं. नेक्स्ट लैंडमार्क्स की अगर मैं बात करूं, इंपॉर्टेंट लैंडमार्क्स, ओके, तो ये मार्किंग्स आ चुके हैं, बस दे हैव आस्क्ड यू द मार्किंग्स एंड वन टाइम a classical case of RTA patient presenting to you with EDH, extradural hemorrhage, and they have asked you what is the structure where the burn hole surgery would be performed. The answer is pterion. ठीक है, so the anterolateral junction of all the sutures is known as anterolateral junction of sutures is known as pterion. Important. ठीक है, so pterion is formed by which bone? जल्दी फ्रंट. So they will ask you exception. जहां जहां 3 या 4 चीजें होती है ना, they tend to ask you the exception. Which bone does not participate in the formation of pterion? ऐसा क्वेश्चन आएगा. So first is the frontal bone, second is the parietal bone, third is the temporal bone, and fourth is the sphenoid bone. Which wing of sphenoid bone? Greater wing or lesser wing? Greater wing of sphenoid bone. Which wing of sphenoid? तो इसमें भी खेल सकते हैं ना वो. So they will give option. Fourth option would be lesser wing of sphenoid. So that would be an exception. तो याद रखना. Pterion is formed by the combination of four bones. First is the, second is the, third is the, and which wing of sphenoid? Greater wing of sphenoid bone. Pterion is the landmark for which artery? So beneath the pterion, which artery lies? Middle meningeal artery. Which artery lies? Middle meningeal artery. And MMA or middle meningeal artery is the most common artery ruptured in which intracranial hemorrhage. It is the most common artery ruptured in the extradural hemorrhage. It is the most common artery ruptured in the extradural hemorrhage. No issues with this. Therefore, in cases of extradural hemorrhage, when we need to perform a decompressive surgery known as burn hole surgery, that would be done at which landmark? No issues with this. Next, here you can see at the junction of the two supraorbital ridges. Okay, ये जो elevated portion है ना orbit के ऊपर का, this is what is known as the supraorbital ridge. So at the junction of two supraorbital ridges, you can see the glabella. The junction of two supraorbital ridges, ये क्वेश्चंस आते हैं और ये क्वेश्चंस हम मिस आउट कर देते हैं यूजुअली ऑप्शंस में. ठीक है, so junction of two supraorbital ridges, the junction of two nasal bones is the and the protruding part of the mandible or the mentum is the gnapion. The protruding part of the mentum is the gnapion. Supraorbital ridges का junction, nasal bones का junction, and protruding part of mentum, gnapion. No issues with this. And the junction of the sutures posteriorly on the posterolateral wall, if there is junction of sutures, this is called as, this one is known as the Asterion. This one is known as the junction of sutures or the skull bones posteriorly is known as the Asterion. Anterolateral pterion, posterolateral Asterion. It is combination of which bones? Skull bones. First is the parietal bone. Second is the occipital bone. Third one is the temporal bone. So which part? Anybody? Petrous, squamous, and mastoid. Which part? Mastoid part. Posterior कौन सा होता है? Mastoid part होता है temporal bone part. ठीक है? So Asterion is the junction of parietal bone, occipital bone, and the mastoid part of the parietal bone, occipital bone, and the mastoid part of the temporal bone. अभी जल्दी से एक बार मुझे sutures बता दो, so I'll be more than happy. So now all of you are quite aware because these sutures वो mark करके हम पूछते हैं, ठीक है? So I hope we have sutures, ठीक है? हाँ, पहले fontanelles पहले sutures बात कर लेते हैं. So we have multiple sutures, right? So how many skull bones होते हैं ये तो बता दो पहले. This skull bone forms the calvaria or the cranial part of the skull. How many skull bones do we have? How many skull bones? 8 skull bones. कितने paired होते हैं, कितने unpaired होते हैं? क्या? कितने paired, कितने unpaired? कितने paired, कितने unpaired? 2 of them are unpaired. 2 of them are unpaired. 2 of them are unpaired. And the rest are paired bones. 2 unpaired होते हैं वो जल्दी बताओ. Occipital and frontal bone. 2 unpaired bones are occipital and 2 occipital are 2 unpaired are Whereas the paired bones would be two parietal bones, two parietal bones, two temporal bones, two temporal bones. Then you also have the ethmoid bone, and lastly the ring shape, that is the sphenoid bone. Ethmoid and the sphenoid bone. ठीक है, ethmoid and the sphenoid bone. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, तो याद रखना. दो it appears like one, but दो parts होते हैं जो बाद में एक मिल जाते हैं. ठीक है, दो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, याद रखना. Skull base is formed by which bone? Skull base is mainly formed by ethmoid तो ऊपर आ गया. Skull base is formed by the sphenoid and occipital bone. Skull base is formed by the sphenoid and occipital bone. Please remember this, important. Now please tell me the suture between the frontal bone and the parietal bone. The frontoparietal suture is known as coronal suture. Frontoparietal suture is then the suture between the two parietal bones. The interparietal suture is sagittal suture. Interparietal suture is sagittal suture. Then the suture between the parietal bone and the occipital bone. The suture between the parietal and the occipital bone. The parieto-occipital suture is lambdoid. The parieto-occipital suture is so it is which shape? Lambda shape or Y shape. Therefore it is called as the lambdoid suture. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, याद रखना. Please let me know one important last finding, and यही गड़बड़ करी थी. They ask you metopic suture is found in which bone? Metopic suture is present in the intrauterine life or during gestation. Metopic suture is a suture between the two frontal bones. Metopic suture is a suture between the okay, so metopic suture is a suture in the frontal bones होता है, बाद में तो एक ही हो जाता है. तो frontal bone का जो suture होता है, it is called as the metopic suture. Frontal bone का suture is called as the metopic suture. Okay, important, याद रखना, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Now जल्दी से, as we know in child usually the sutures they do not, or the cranial bones do not fuse to each other. Okay, so the sutures are not ossified during birth. Why? Because during delivery there is a narrow passage of the pelvic outlet, and therefore the skull bone should mold over each other. Okay, the skull bones should overlap over each other. That is what is called as molding. Okay, so for that usually the skull bones are not ossified, or the sutures are not ossified. Okay, so if the sutures are not fused, there would be some spaces left, and these gaps which are left between the sutures, these gaps are called as fontanelles. Gaps between the sutures are anterior fontanelle is also known as bregma. Anterior fontanelle is also known as an anterior fontanelle closes by 18 to 24 months. Anterior fontanelle closes by bregma closes by largest fontanelle is the कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, posterior fontanelle is called as suture. कौन सा था posteriorly? Lambdoid suture. So the posterior fontanelle is called as and lambda or posterior fontanelle closes by at birth it does not close. Posterior fontanelle of the lambda closes by 3 to 6 months, usually 2 to 3 months, याद रख लो. So the posterior fontanelle closes by 3 months. Okay, the posterior fontanelle closes by 3 months. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, the pterion will close by. Pterion is also not ossified at birth, so pterion will close by. Asterion भी बता देना, metopic suture भी बता देना. So metopic suture closes by 3 to 6 months. Metopic suture closes by pterion and asterion. जल्दी. Pterion and asterion close by 6 to 12 months. Pterion and asterion close by 6 6 to 12 months. ठीक है, no issues with this. Pterion थोड़ा पहले, Asterion बाद, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Next, if I talk about this one, ये सब नेटर्स की इमेजेस, ठीक है, at class शायद लाके सबने रखा होगा. Next one, this one that you can see, the pink color bone, they have just marked it. ठीक है, पहली एग्जाम में उन्होंने बस ये पिंक कलर का बोन मार्क किया था छोटा. Okay, that is what is your vomer bone. That is known as your vomer bone. The small bone that you can see, the pink color one, this is the vomer bone. The pink color small bone is known as the vomer bone. Pink color small bone is the vomer bone over here. ठीक है, important. And the vomer bone forms which wall of the nasal cavity? Medial or the lateral wall? Vomer forms the medial wall. Vomer forms the medial wall of nasal cavity. Okay, lateral wall of nasal cavity is formed by. Lateral wall of nasal cavity is formed by. अरे ENT के एनाटॉमी से क्वेश्चन आते हैं 2 साल, लाइक दिस जून में एग्जाम में थायराइड कार्टिलेज से क्वेश्चन था. अगर एनाटॉमी की हालत है तो ENT में क्या आंसर करोगे भाई साहब? पेपर 1 के तो लगे हुए हैं, पेपर 2 के मत लगाना, इंपॉर्टेंट है. क्या होता है कंट्रीब्यूशन? lateral nasal wall is formed by lateral wall of nasal cavity. Upper part is formed by the 2 nasal bones. Upper part is formed by the 2 and lower part is formed by the 3 pairs of cartilages. Lower part is formed by the 3 pairs of cartilages. कौन से cartilages होता है? Upper lateral cartilage, lower lateral cartilage and 2 sesamoid cartilage. Okay, lower lateral cartilages are also known as alar cartilages. Okay, so lower lateral are also known as alar cartilages. Whereas the medial wall or the nasal septum, medial wall is formed by the nasal septum. So this medial wall is formed by which bone? Vomer bone. Medial wall is formed by which bone? Vomer bone. And the other contribution is from the perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone. The other contribution is from the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. याद रखना. No issues with this. So याद रखना the 2 bone which forms the medial wall of the nasal cavity. First is the vomer bone. Second is the perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Second is the perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone. No issues with this. 2 bones. उसके अलावा minor contributions are from the crest or spine of frontal bone, crest of maxilla, rostrum of sphenoid. इनसे भी आता है minor contribution. But the major contribution is from the vomer and the perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone. And the main cartilage, that is the septal or the quadrangular cartilage. Which cartilage? Septal or the quadrangular cartilage. ठीक है. Then next you can see this bone over here in the nasal cavity. Okay, at the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. This independent bone and the inferior part of the nasal cavity is known as, anybody? Meatus तो उसके नीचे होगी ना. Bone का नाम क्या होता है? Inferior concha. Bone is known as inferior. Bone is known as inferior. So lateral wall of nasal cavity. The inferior most bone is the inferior concha. When this inferior concha would be covered with mucosa, then it would be called as inferior turbinate. And inferior turbinate के नीचे जो जगह होगी, that is called as inferior meatus. So inferior concha is an independent bone, but superior and middle concha are a part of ethmoid bone. Middle and superior concha are a part of ethmoid bone. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, याद रखना important. So which is the separate bone? Inferior concha is a completely separate bone and the largest concha. ठीक है? And largest meatus is middle meatus. Widest and largest meatus is the middle meatus. ठीक है? 4 paranasal sinus open होती है. Then this is the beneath the orbit. Beneath the orbit we have a foramen known as the infraorbital foramen. Beneath the orbit we have foramen known as the infraorbital foramen. So if there is fracture of the orbit, okay, the nerve passing through this infraorbital foramen would be injured. Which is this nerve known as? Facial nerve passes by the infraorbital foramen or the stylomastoid foramen. So facial nerve comes out of the stylomastoid foramen. Facial nerve comes out from the stylomastoid foramen. Facial nerve comes out from which foramen? Stylomastoid foramen. Infraorbital foramen, the नाम ही उसके infraorbital nerve. Which nerve comes out from infraorbital foramen? Infraorbital nerve. and it will cause anesthesia of the cheek. It will cause loss of sensation or anesthesia over the cheek. It will cause loss of sensation or anesthesia over the cheek. It is due to fracture of the floor of orbit. It is due to blowout fracture of floor of orbit. ठीक है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. तो ये एप्लाइड क्वेश्चन से गए. तुम एनाटॉमी रट रहे हो तो मत रटो, कोई फायदा नहीं होगा अगर तुम्हें एप्लाइड नहीं पता है. ठीक है, तो इस फंक्शन में पढ़ो क्योंकि वो मेडिसिन, सर्जरी, ईएनटी हर एक चीज में मदद करेंगे हमेशा. तो प्लीज अर्निका मैम की क्लास ली होगी तो डेफिनेटली विल हैव एवरीथिंग ओवर देयर. एक भी क्वेश्चन ऐसा नहीं है जो अर्निका मैम के नोट्स के बाहर का हो. So it's better you can read it from there. Then this orange color bone is known as the zygomatic bone. Zygomatic bone के कितने प्रोसेस होता है? कितने processes are there for zygomatic bone? Maxillary, frontal and the temporal process. कितने? 3 processes, and therefore zygomatic bone is also known as the tripod bone. Zygomatic bone is also known as the tripod bone. Okay, याद रखना. Zygomatic bone is also known as the tripod bone. If I ask you which is the most commonly fractured bone of face, most common facial bone to fracture. Very good. Most common facial bone to fracture is the nasal bone. Most common facial bone to fracture is the second most common is the zygomatic bone. इसीलिए important है. ठीक है. Second most common is the because these are most prominent. Okay, most common is the nasal bone. Second most common is the zygomatic bone, and that is what is called as a tripod fracture. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, याद रखना. Tripod fracture is seen in which facial bone? Zygomatic bone. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, अभी याद रख लो. ऑर्बिट के कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस भी पूछे थे, वो भले ही मैं क्यूआरएस में डिस्कस कर लूंगा, बट देख लो इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है जल्दी. ऑर्बिट इज फॉर्म बाय व्हिच बोन? जल्दी से. फर्स्ट इज द फ्रंटल बोन, सेकंड इज द zygomatic bone, third is the maxillary bone, fourth is the sphenoid bone, then next is the ethmoid bone, next is the purple color one is the lacrimal bone. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. तो walls of orbit अगर वो पूछे, important है. floor of orbit is formed by which bone? मैम ने निमोनिक दिया यार, पजामा. floor of orbit is formed by पजामा. बोलो floor of orbit. पजामा कहाँ पहनते हो? नीचे. तो floor of orbit is formed by पजामा. PA for palatine bone, PA for ZA for zygomatic bone, ZA for and MA for maxillary bone, and medial wall is formed by कम से कम ये 2 walls because these are clinically important, because the weakest wall overall is of orbit is medial wall. Weakest wall of orbit is but the most common to be fractured is inferior wall. Of the floor. Important one liners है. So medial wall is formed by smell. S for sphenoid bone, M for maxillary bone, E for ethmoid bone, and L for lacrimal bone. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, अभी याद रखो, important चीजें है ये. Okay, the orange color one, this is the nasal bone. ठीक है. And on the orbit we have this notch known as the supraorbital notch. इसको क्या बोलेंगे? Supraorbital notch. And the ridge is called as the supraorbital ridge. And junction of 2 supraorbital ridges is called as glabella. It is called as the glabella. No issues with this. Most common fractured part in the mandible. Important चीजें यही कर रहे थे मैं bones की. Most common fractured part of a mandible is, surgery में मैंने बोला था, it is the condyle followed by the angle. Okay, so most common fractured part of mandible is condyle. Most commonly fractured part of mandible is condyle. Okay, so neck of the condyle usually weak होती है वो. ठीक है, followed by the angle of mandible. And if there is a fracture of the mentum of the mandible, this is known as a dangerous fracture. Okay, butterfly fracture बोलते हैं, because it causes release of which muscle? It causes the release of the, very good, safety muscle of tongue, that is the genioglossus muscle. Safety muscle of tongue is, अगर लग रहा होगा बहुत ऊपर नीचे जा रहा है, ओके, तो मैं इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स कवर करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. ठीक है, क्योंकि एनाटॉमी सबने पढ़ रखी है, बहुत सीक्वेंस में पढ़ के तुमने कोई तीर नहीं मार रही है, तो कम से कम इंपॉर्टेंट क्लिनिकली पढ़ लेता है. ठीक है. सो रिलीज ऑफ विच मसल? genioglossus muscle, and genioglossus muscle is also known as safety muscle of tongue. It is known as safety muscle of tongue. Important. Largest tongue muscle is genioglottal. Largest tongue muscle is, इसकी इमेज आई थी cadaveric image in June 2021. ठीक है? So they give you a tongue and उसके नीचे बहुत बड़ी muscle they have marked and they ask you which muscle is this. That was the genioglottal muscle. ठीक है? So largest muscle of tongue is genioglottal muscle. Fan shape की होती है. ठीक है? It is fan shape usually. No issues with this. Important चीजें हो गई. Moving further. So यहाँ पे important इतना ही याद रखो. Brainstem है ये. ठीक है? इतना तो पता चल गया. This is the brainstem, which is brainstem is formed by three structures: the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. Midbrain is known as, Latin name बताओ. Diencephalon. Midbrain is called as. Midbrain is known as. Midbrain is known as. And medulla is known as. Myelencephalon. Medulla oblongata is called as. Medulla oblongata is called as myelencephalon. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, important चीज है, ठीक है? So here you can see the thalamus. The anterior most structure of the brainstem is the thalamus. Then there are superior and the inferior colliculus. ठीक है? ये यहाँ पे important नहीं है, but auditory and visual pathway में देखते हैं इसको. Sorry, midbrain is the mesencephalon. Midbrain is the mesencephalon. Okay, midbrain is the mesencephalon. Diencephalon किसको बोलते हैं? Diencephalon. Thalamus plus दो है ना, तो diencephalon. Thalamus plus hypothalamus plus thalamus plus is called as diencephalon. Thalamus plus hypothalamus are called as hypothalamus important है. जैसे मैंने बोला limbic system, frontal lobe, वैसे hypothalamus का भी function पूछा. What is the function of hypothalamus? It regulates the body temperature. It regulates the body temperature, and it is the master of the master gland. It is the master of the master gland. किसको बोलते हैं? Master gland is pituitary gland, and master of master है, the headmaster कौन हुआ? Hypothalamus. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. So then these are superior and inferior colliculus. As I told you, all the cranial nerves arise from the ventral aspect of the brain, but only nerve which arises from the dorsal aspect of brain है. तो ये क्वेश्चन पीजी तक में आता है, तुम्हारे इसमें भी आया है, तो घबरा मत जाना, इजी है. ब्रेनस्टेम दिखाइए, एक ही नर्व अराइज होती है, वो dorsal aspect, and that is the nerve arising from dorsal aspect is तो इमेज ऐसे से देख लेना ट्रोक्लियर के लिए, बाकी कोई नहीं पूछेंगे. ट्रोक्लियर के लिए ऐसा इमेज आएगा. They will mark this nerve and they will ask you which nerve is this. So only nerve arising from dorsal aspect is the trochlear. No issues with this. Anybody? Moving further. Then this is the superior and middle and inferior cerebellar peduncles होते हैं, and this is the floor of fourth ventricle. So floor of fourth ventricle is formed by the brain stem. ठीक है? We will discuss the ventricles. Usually वो CT आया था, तो CT दिखाऊंगा, CT और MRI. Next, ये last December का question था. If there is lesion in the spinal cord, okay, for example, there is lesion in the spinal cord at this level, okay, so at the level of lesion, there is complete sensory loss. At the level of lesion there will be complete sensory loss. Below the level of lesion, ठीक है? Below the level of lesion, ipsilateral side में there would be loss of same side, or ipsilateral side there would be loss of joint position, fine touch, vibration, 2-point discrimination. So jaldi se, in cases if there is a lesion in a spinal cord, at the level there would be at the level of lesion there would be a complete, at the level of lesion there would be a complete, at the level of lesion there would be a complete. Below the level of lesion on the same side there would be ipsilateral loss of joint position, ipsilateral loss of fine touch, ipsilateral loss of vibration, ipsilateral loss of 2-point discrimination, okay? All of these, joint position, fine touch, vibration, and 2-point discrimination, are carried by which corticospinal tracts? These are carried by which corticospinal tracts? Anterior, lateral, or the dorsal or posterior spinal tracts? सब sensations है. मैंने बोला था which spinal horns will carry sensation? Sensory are the posterior spinal horns, na? So please remember, all of these sensations are carried by the posterior corticospinal tract. Okay, all of these sensations are carried by the posterior corticospinal tract. Important. Whereas on the contralateral side or on the opposite side, there would be loss of pain and temperature. As we know, pain and temperature are always, and they are carried by which corticospinal tract? They are carried by the lateral. Important, याद हो गया जल्दी से. So pain and temperature are carried by the, and pain and temperature are always, PCD is in the morning. ठीक है, याद रखना. Then if I talk about the dorsal or the posterior corticospinal tracts, they will carry which way sensation? First is joint position, second is fine touch, third is vibration, fourth is 2-point discrimination. All of these are carried by the posterior of dorsal corticospinal tract. ठीक है? So complete sensory loss at the level of lesion, ipsilateral loss of dorsal functions and contralateral loss of lateral function. This is which syndrome? So this is a characteristic case of Brown-Sequard syndrome. So Brown-Sequard syndrome causes damage to all the corticospinal tract except कौन से नहीं दिख रहा है? Anterior. Brown-Sequard syndrome spares which corticospinal tract? तो ये important याद रखना, ठीक है? वो exception पूछे तो कौन सा? So Brown-Sequard syndrome does not involve the anterior corticospinal tract. Brown-Sequard syndrome does not involve the anterior corticospinal tract. And as we know, anterior corticospinal tract is known to carry which function? Motor होता है. So it is known to carry crude touch and pressure. Fine touch by posterior tract. But crude touch by anterior tract. No issues with this. याद रखना. ठीक है? So which corticospinal tract is not involved in Brown-Sequard? Anterior is not involved in Brown-Sequard syndrome. So Brown-Sequard syndrome की एक बार definition पूछ ली थी. It is what? It is the hemisection of spinal cord. What do we mean by Brown-Sequard syndrome? What is seen in Brown-Sequard syndrome? Hemisection of spinal cord is usually seen. ठीक है? एक साइड में ही lesion होगा. If in a spinal cord, ठीक है? So if in a spinal cord there is loss in the central part, this is what is called as syringo. So central part of spinal cord is damaged. It is called as central part of spinal cord is damaged. Is called as and syringomyelia. The most common cause in India would be TB. Burning hand. The most common cause in India would be tuberculosis. Cavity is formed in the center of the spinal cord. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. syringomyelia. ठीक है? इसी के साथ इंपॉर्टेंट मुझे 2-3 सिंड्रोम्स बता दो जल्दी से. CVA भी रिवाइज हो जाएगा, एनाटॉमी भी. So first of all, if I talk about the lateral medullary syndrome. Lateral medullary syndrome is also called as, very good, Wallenberg syndrome. Lateral medullary syndrome is, and it causes palsy of which cranial nerve? It causes palsy of 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th cranial nerve. Okay, which cranial nerve palsy is seen in Wallenberg syndrome? 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th. Which cranial nerve palsy is seen in lateral medullary syndrome or Wallenberg syndrome? 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th cranial nerve palsy. So इतने सारे फीचर्स होंगे. तो dysphonia है, dysarthria है, ठीक है? The patient is having absent gag reflex, absent cough reflex, ठीक है? So there is inability to swallow, dysphagia है, okay? So all of these functions is usually loss of sensations over the face है, ठीक है? So all of these sensations, बहुत सारे sensations अगर आते हैं, then definitely if most of the sensations are lost, you need to think in terms of lateral medullary syndrome, also known as Wallenberg syndrome. Easy है बहुत सारे cranial nerve के functions गायब हो जाएंगे, ठीक है? Next, if I talk about medial medullary syndrome, so पहले तो ये बता दो, lateral medullary syndrome is due to occlusion of which artery? Lateral medullary syndrome or Wallenberg syndrome is caused due to occlusion of which artery? जल्दी. It is caused by, तो ये important है याद रखना, सबने pica ये जरूर याद कर रखा है, but more than pica, it is due to occlusion of the vertebral artery first, followed by pica. ठीक है, याद रखना. पाई का अलग सा नाम जरूर है, but the most common cause is occlusion of the vertebral artery. याद रखना. So lateral medullary syndrome or Wallenberg syndrome is due to occlusion mainly of which artery? Wallenberg syndrome is due to occlusion of mainly which artery? Vertebral artery followed by pica, posterior inferior cerebellar artery. No issues with this anybody? Jaldi se. Medial medullary syndrome is due to occlusion of medial medullary syndrome. As we all saw, lateral medulla से या lateral pontomedullary junction से all these cranial nerves were arising 7, 8, 9, 10, ठीक है? But medial medulla से एक ही nerve arise हो रही थी. Medial medulla से एक ही nerve. Very good. It was the 12th cranial nerve. Medial medulla से which cranial nerve arises? Medial medulla से which cranial nerve arises? Medial medulla से which cranial nerve arises? In medial medullary syndrome, there would be palsy of which cranial nerve? There is palsy of which cranial nerve in medial medullary syndrome? Along with there would be a contralateral. There would be a contralateral. There would be a contralateral hemiplegia. There would be a contralateral hemiplegia. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Mainly 12 cranial nerve palsy रखो, क्योंकि question में कभी contralateral hemiplegia देंगे भी, शायद नहीं भी दे. ठीक है? But 12 cranial nerve palsy जरूर देंगे, क्योंकि वो always is there. ठीक है? याद रखना. No issues with this. So एक important चीजें ही बता रहा हूँ. So which artery is involved in medial medullary syndrome? Which artery is occluded in medial medullary syndrome? Is the medial meningeal यहाँ होती है. Anterior spinal artery. Which artery is occluded? Anterior spinal artery. Which artery is occluded? Anterior spinal artery. एक ही होती है. Anterior spinal artery combine हो जाती है, and that supplies the medial part of the medulla. So occlusion of which artery causes medial medullary syndrome? Which occlusion of which artery causes medial medullary syndrome? Occlusion of which artery causes medial medullary syndrome? And in medial medullary syndrome, which cranial nerve palsy is seen? Well, that is hypoglossal nerve palsy. Movement of tongues would not be seen. Okay, important. Sorry. Weber syndrome is anybody due to palsy of which cranial nerve? Weber syndrome causes palsy of which cranial nerve? Sannata. Very good, Virat. Weber syndrome causes palsy of third cranial nerve. Weber syndrome causes palsy of. आजकल मेडिसिन से, एनाटॉमी से यही क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं. ठीक है? लास्ट टाइम भी ब्राउन सेक्वेट पूछा गया था, तो ये बाकी सिंड्रोम्स ऑप्शन में थे. तो अगली बार ये क्वेश्चन, इनका क्वेश्चन बन सकता है. ठीक है? इजी है. सीवीए में भी हेल्प करेंगे. सीवीए मतलब स्ट्रोक में भी अगर ये आर्टरीज इन्वॉल्व है और ऐसे सिम्टम्स है, तो इजीली हो जाएगा कि किस पार्ट का सीवीए, किस पार्ट का स्ट्रोक हो चुका है. ठीक है? सो वेबर सिंड्रोम इज palsy of which cranial nerve? Weber syndrome is due to palsy of which cranial nerve? Third cranial nerve, along with contralateral hemiplegia. Along with contralateral hemiplegia. And Weber syndrome is due to occlusion of which artery? Weber syndrome is due to occlusion of the. Weber syndrome is due to occlusion of the. बराबर बोलो तो सही जोर से. Branch of internal carotid artery known as the ophthalmic artery. Branch of internal carotid artery known as the ophthalmic artery. ठीक है? But it can be a lesion at the internal carotid artery as well. ठीक है? याद रखना. So अगर ipsilateral, if there is hemiplegia, then the internal carotid artery would be involved. If there is only third cranial nerve palsy, then the branches would be involved. ठीक है? So Weber syndrome is due to which nerve palsy? Third cranial nerve palsy. And which artery is occluded? Internal carotid artery is occluded. No issues with this. Last, jaldi se. Millard-Gubler syndrome. Millard-Gubler syndrome. Millard-Gubler syndrome. Palsy of which cranial nerve? 6th and 7th. Palsy of which cranial nerve? Palsy of which cranial nerve? So 6th and 7th cranial nerve palsy is seen in which syndrome? Palsy of 6th and 7th cranial nerve is seen in which syndrome? Millard-Gubler syndrome. It is due to occlusion of the. It is due to occlusion of the basilar artery. It is due to occlusion of the basilar artery. It is due to occlusion of the. It is due to occlusion of the. It is due to occlusion of the basilar artery. No issues with this, anybody? कोई दिक्कत नहीं अभी, याद रखना. Then if I talk about this one, what is this? This is a motor homunculus. This is a motor homunculus. And इस motor homunculus में क्या दिख रहा है? That means which part of the brain is responsible for which part of the body. In brain also, I hope all of you are quite aware. Like just like I, we have cross innervations. That means the right side of the body is managed by the left side of the brain, and the left side of the body is managed by the right side of the brain. So if there is a right-sided hemiplegia, the lesion is on the left side. Right-sided hemiplegia region is on the left-sided hemiplegia region is on the right side. तो ये याद रखना, वो लीजन की जगह भी पूछते हैं, मतलब तुम्हें तो ये तो हेमिप्लेजिया तुमने पता लगा दिया कि एमसीए आर्टरी ब्लॉक है, ठीक है, डेंस हेमिप्लेजिया है, बट कौन सी है एमसीए, राइट और लेफ्ट, तो उसमें खेलेंगे, वो ऑप्टिक ट्रैक में भी इसी तरह से करते तुम्हें, ठीक है, इंपॉर्टेंट है. So please remember, here you can see the anterior lobe or the frontal lobe of the brain is responsible for innervations to the, it is responsible for control of the foot, the leg, the hip. That means the lower limb is controlled by the anterior part of the brain. Lower limb is controlled by the anterior part of the brain. Then we have the trunk, the neck, the head, shoulder, arm. Okay, and then comes the elbow, forearm, wrist, hand. Okay, and then all your fingers. ठीक है, all your fingers. ठीक है. So upper limb or your hand is usually on the lateral side. Upper limb or hand is usually on the lateral side. Upper limb or hand is usually on the lateral side. ठीक है, no issues with this. And then comes your eye, nose, face, teeth, gums, and all of that usually on the posterolateral side. Usually on the posterolateral side. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. So if I say a patient has anterior cerebral artery block, then the patient will have weakness. Okay, anterior cerebral artery में the patient will have anterior cerebral artery blockage में the patient will have weakness, which will be more prominent in the lower limb or upper limb. The weakness is more prominent in the weakness is more prominent in lower limbs. Yeah, if there is anterior cerebral artery, the weakness will be more predominant in the lower limbs. If there is MCA artery block, middle cerebral artery block causes, so it will decrease the blood supply to the internal capsule, and internal capsule is the collection of all the corticospinal fibers. So अगर सबके सब corticospinal fibers को blood supply कम है, then the patient will have dense hemiplegia. The patient will have dense. So dense hemiplegia is due to occlusion of which artery? Dense hemiplegia is due to occlusion of which artery? Weakness more in legs is due to occlusion of which artery? And vision loss will be due to occlusion of which artery? Visual hallucinations? Posterior cerebral artery. Okay. Visual hallucinations are due to occlusion of the posterior cerebral artery, because the visual cortex of the occipital lobe will receive decreased blood supply. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, याद हो गई चीजें important. आगे बढ़ते हैं. These are the visual tract and the optic tract and the auditory tract. Important चीजें मैं पूरा lesions वगैरह just short में बता रहा हूँ, ऑप्शन में बाद में cover करूँगा. This is the optic pathway, and the next one is the auditory pathway. Next one is the auditory pathway. Horner syndrome is due to compression of the cervical sympathetic chain. ठीक है, due to compression of the cervical sympathetic chain, उसकी वजह से होता है, ठीक है. Then now please remember here, if I talk about Horner syndrome, like features Weber's में दिख सकते हैं क्योंकि third cranial nerve affected होती है, ठीक है, अगर वो पूछते हो. Optic pathway की अगर मैं बात करूँ, visual pathway, ठीक है, which cranial nerve is involved in the visual pathway? Optic nerve, second cranial nerve. Which cranial nerve in the auditory pathway? Eighth cranial nerve, that is your vestibulocochlear nerve. jaldi se auditory pathway easy, it is remembered by the mnemonic E. coli ma. ठीक है, E goes for the eighth nerve, C goes for the cochlea, C goes for the, so if they ask you which is the sensory end organ of hearing, cochlea के अंदर भी कुछ होता है ना, sensory end organ of hearing, organ of Cortical. Sensory end organ of hearing is organ of, and this organ of Cortical. ज़्यादा ENT हो जाएगा, कोई नहीं. So sensory end organ of hearing is organ of Cortical. ठीक है. Then O goes for the superior olivary complex. O goes for the superior olivary complex. L goes for, इधर लिखा नहीं है, lateral lemniscus. L goes for lateral lemniscus. Then I goes for inferior colliculus. M goes for medial geniculate body. And lastly, A goes for the auditory cortex. Which is located in which lobe of the brain? temporal lobe of the brain is the auditory cortex. So that is the E. coli auditory pathway. Start from the 8th nerve and from the auditory cortex. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Important. If anywhere there is a lesion, the patient will have its unilateral hearing loss. Which type? Conductive or sensory neural? The patient will have a sensory neural hearing loss. याद रखना. Next, if I talk about this one here, it is the optic pathway. Okay? So optic pathway starts from the optic nerve. This optic nerve is, I hope all of you are quite aware, it usually arises from the retina, right? And it is made up of all the ganglion cell layers. What is the sensory end organ for eye? Sensory end organ for eye. Sensory end organ. Retina में क्या होता है? Which are the sensory end organs? The photoreceptors known as rods and cones. Sensory end organs for vision are rods and cones. Sensory end organs for vision are rods and cones. Important feature to be remembered. Rods and cones are which type of neurons? They are first order neurons. Very good. And they are the bipolar neurons. Rods and cones are bipolar neurons. ठीक है. So bipolar neurons दो जगह पे पड़े. First was the olfactory neurons. First was the olfactory neurons. So second are the rods and cones. Second are the rods and cones. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Rods and cones को मुझे जल्दी से फिजियो से भी बता दो. रेस्टिंग मेम्ब्रेन पोटेंशियल कितना होता है? Rods and cones का रेस्टिंग मेम्ब्रेन पोटेंशियल है. Rods and cones का रेस्टिंग मेम्ब्रेन पोटेंशियल ऑनलाइन ऑल ऑफ यू. अरे फिजियो पढ़ी है. अब तो तू बाकी के भी बता मुझे जरा. कार्डियक मसल का कितना होता है? कार्डियक मसल का कितना होता है? कार्डियक मसल is minus 90 millivolts. Skeletal muscle is minus 85 millivolts. Skeletal muscle is minus 85 millivolts. ठीक है? Neurons is minus 70 millivolts. Neurons is minus 70 millivolts. Smooth muscle is minus 50 millivolts. Smooth muscle is minus 50 millivolts. ठीक है? RBC is minus 90. Very good. हाँ. और rods and cones is minus 40 millivolts. Rods and cones are minus 40 millivolts. कुछ बुक्स minus 50 भी देखती है. तो rods and cones are minus 40 millivolts. Organ of cortex और inner hair cells minus 50 millivolts. ठीक है? कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Then here, as we know, the optic nerve is made up of two fibers. As we discussed, the temporal and the nasal fibers. Which fibers cross at the optic chiasma? The nasal fibers cross at the optic chiasma. Okay. Then usually the optic nerve continues and terminates on the this body known as the lateral geniculate body. The optic nerve terminates on the lateral geniculate body. So medial geniculate body was part of auditory pathway, but lateral geniculate body is a part of visual pathway. No issues with this. From lateral geniculate body, this optic radiation will arise. What will arise? Optic radiation. And this optic radiation of the geniculocalcrine tract, it will go and terminate on the primary visual cortex. It will terminate in the primary visual cortex, located in which lobe? Occipital lobe. Now, lesion. जल्दी से बताओ, मैं पूछूंगा, ठीक है? So if there is lesion at the optic nerve, complete optic nerve damage causes ipsilateral anopia. Complete optic nerve damage causes ipsilateral anopia. Damage at optic chiasma causes bitemporal hemianopia. Compression of optic chiasma causes bitemporal hemianopia. That means both the temporal vision fields would be lost, and it is also called as heteronymous hemianopia. But beneath the optic chiasma, below the optic chiasma, lesion anywhere in the optic tract, in the lateral geniculate body, in the optic radiation or the visual cortex, there would be a homonymous hemianopia. Which type of hemianopia? Homonymous hemianopia. That means half of the vision field is lost, but on the same side. Homonymous means same side. That means right half of both eyes or left half of both eyes. Characteristic यही mention होगा. Right half of both eyes, the vision field is lost. The lesion would be in the optic tract, that on the left side. Left half of both eyes, vision loss is there. In the right optic tract. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. And macular sparing is seen in visual cortex damage. Macular sparing is a feature of visual cortex damage. No issues with this. So this is how ये anatomy वाले भी बाद में जो question उठाते इसी वजह से उठाते because this is also their funda. उनका भी ये है. नेक्स्ट जल्दी से पीरियड्स, अगर मैं एम्ब्रियोलॉजी की बात करें जल्दी जल्दी करेंगे. पीरियड, प्री एम्ब्रियोनिक पीरियड इज फ्रॉम 0 to 2 weeks of intrauterine life. Pre embryonic 0 to 2 weeks. Pre embryonic 0 to 2 weeks. Pre embryonic 0 to 2 weeks. Embryonic period कब embryo बोलोगे? 2 to 8 weeks. Embryonic period is from 2 to embryonic period is from 2 to 8. So therefore the baby would be called embryo till how many weeks of intrauterine life? Till 8 weeks of intrauterine life the baby is called as embryo. After 8 weeks, from 9 weeks till birth it is called as a fetus. From 9 birth till birth it is called as a, so fetal period is from 9 weeks till birth. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Important. Now if I talk about the primary oocyte, important one liners कर रहा हूँ मैं embryo के बस. Primary oocyte gets arrested in which phase? Meiosis 1. Which phase of meiosis 1? Very good. Growth phase of meiosis 1. Primary oocyte is arrested in meiosis 1. Which phase? Primary oocyte is arrested in meiosis 1. Which phase? P for P. Okay. Secondary oocyte is arrested in meiosis 2. Secondary oocyte is arrested in meiosis. Secondary oocyte is arrested in meiosis. Which phase of meiosis 2? Metaphase. Which phase of meiosis 2? So secondary oocyte is arrested in meiosis 2. Which phase? Metaphase. Which phase? Metaphase. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. लाइफ स्पैन ऑफ ओवा जल्दी. लाइफ स्पैन ऑफ ओवा इज सिंगल बेस्ट आंसर है 24 आवर्स. सिंगल बेस्ट आंसर है. लाइफ स्पैन ऑफ स्पर्म है 72. गाइनी वालों के हिसाब से 96. एनाटॉमी वालों के हिसाब से. ठीक है. तो 72 to 96 आवर्स. ठीक है. नो इश्यूज विद दिस. 72 to 96 आवर्स. व्हाई? बिकॉज़ स्पर्म can live up to 96 hours, but actually useful कब तक होता है? 72 hours तक. उसके बाद तो वो बूढ़ा हो जाता है. ठीक है. Next, if I talk about पहले तो fertilization. So I hope all of you are quite aware. So egg is released after, egg of the ova is released after ovulation, and when there is a sexual intercourse, the sperm will come and fertilize the ova. This is called as fertilization. Okay, and they will break which layer of the ova? They will break the zona pellucida. They will break the zona pellucida. By which enzyme? Acrosomal enzyme. By which enzyme? Acrosomal enzyme. These acrosomal enzymes usually will break the zona pellucida, and that will cause entry of the sperm inside the ova. पूरा sperm जाता है, बस nucleus जाता है. So it is the only male pronucleus which enters the ova. Okay, then the fertilized structure is known as the zygote. Fertilized structure is known as the zygote. Then this zygote will divide and redivide. क्या होगा? Meiosis या mitosis? Now there will be mitosis. Meiosis में the chromosome number becomes half. Diploid से haploid. Mitosis में the chromosome number remains same. Okay, diploid to diploid या haploid to haploid, जो भी हो. ठीक है. So cell divisions will occur over here. Okay, this zygote will go into 2 cell stage, 4 cell stage, 8 cell stage, and then it will go 16, 32 कितना? So it will go into a 16 cell stage, and this 16 cell stage is called as, the 16 cell stage of a zygote is called as, 16 cell stage of a zygote is called as morula, and the zygote will enter the uterine cavity in the stage of morula. It will enter the uterine cavity in the stage of morula. In the way it will turn to 32 cell stage. ठीक है. So it will enter the uterine cavity in the stage of morula usually. ठीक है. No issues with this. Then morula is formed on which day after fertilization? Morula is formed on, बोलो तो सही जोर से. यार तुक्के ही मार लो भाई. Morula is formed 3rd day after fertilization. Morula is formed 3rd day after fertilization. ठीक है. Then morula enters the uterine cavity on 4th day after fertilization. Morula enters the uterine cavity on 4th day after fertilization. Then morula is converted to a blastocyst on 5th day after fertilization. Morula is converted to blastocyst on 5th day after fertilization. And implantation occurs on 6th day after fertilization. So implantation starts on 6th day after fertilization. Whereas implantation completes by 9th day. Implantation completes by, so jaldi se morula is formed on 3rd day after fertilization. Then Morula enters the uterine cavity on 4th day after fertilization. Blastocyst is formed on 5th day after fertilization. Then the implantation occurs on 6th day after fertilization. And implantation completes by 9th day after fertilization. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Important है, all of these are one-liners. ठीक है? So blastocyst, as you can see, what is a blastocyst? Here you can see a structure which is containing this. तो ये 4 number का क्या है? जल्दी बताओ. Very good. It is the inner cell mass. The condensed tissues are known as the inner cell mass. Okay, so inner cell mass is also known as embryoblast. Inner cell mass is also known as embryoblast. And this embryoblast will develop into embryo proper. This embryoblast will develop into embryo proper. Whereas this second structure, where these single layer of cells are lining the cavity, this is known as the trophoblast. Okay, outer cell mass also known as the and this trophoblast will develop into the placenta. Trophoblast develops into the placenta. Then this one, the cavity inside it is known as the. So ये structure तो क्या है? ये सबको पता है ना? This structure is a blastocyst, which is formed after morula. This is a blastocyst. Blastocyst कब बोलेंगे? जब उसमें fluid होता है. When it contains fluid, it is called as a cyst, right? And the cyst would be the fluid would be present in the cavity, and this cavity is what is called as blastocele. The cavity is called as blastocele. तो ये markings भी पूछी जाती है usually anatomy में, ठीक है? And the third structure is zona pellucida. The third one is the zona pellucida. So inner cell mass is known as embryoblast. It develops into embryo proper. The outer cell mass is known as trophoblast, which develops into placenta. The cavity is called as blastocele, and the outer layer is called as zona pellucida, and the structure is called as blastocyst. कोई इशू नहीं है, कैविटी है तो ब्लास्टोसिस्ट हो गया. फॉलिकल के बारे में पूछा था लास्ट टाइम, एंट्रल फॉलिकल, तो ब्लास्टोसिस्ट तो पूछ ही सकते हैं, ठीक है? तो फॉलिकल which contains the cavity and contains the fluid is called as a antral follicle. So this is the embryoblast. ये पहले क्वेश्चन आ चुका है. They have given an embryo and they have marked at this structure and they asked, sorry, specifically this structure, ठीक है? So they have marked at this structure and they have asked what is this structure. Very good. क्या डेवलप होता है यहाँ से? Heart डेवलप होगा. So this is a cardiac bulge. This one is a cardiac bulge. This one is a cardiac bulge. So what are these? These are the upper and lower limb buds. Okay, these are upper and lower limb buds. This is the tail. This is the tail which will develop into the coccyx. Tail develops into the coccyx. Okay. Then what is this? All these. Very good. These are the pharyngeal arcs. These are the pharyngeal. ये नीट का क्वेश्चन आ चुका है तो तुम्हें भी आ सकता है. ये इजी है सबसे क्योंकि, ठीक है? These are the pharyngeal arcs. These are the pharyngeal arcs. And this is what is known as the, यहाँ से क्या डेवलप होगा? Head. So this is known as the head bulge. This is known as the head bulge. ठीक है? So the superior most is the head bulge. Then comes the pharyngeal arch. Then comes the cardiac bulge. Then there are upper and lower limb buds. And last is the tail which develops into the coccyx. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, easy है, ठीक है? तो ऐसा ही इमेज आ चुकी है पहले एम्ब्रियो वाली, इसीलिए दिखाई. FMG में आ चुकी है. कार्डियक बल्ज पूछा था, easy they will ask you. Then if I say a patient has abnormal migration of primordial germ cells, abnormal migration of primordial germ cells to the sacrococcygeal region. Okay, abnormal migration of primordial germ cells to sacrococcygeal region can lead to formation of such a tumor in the sacrococcygeal region. This is what is called as, ये image आ चुकी है. This is called as the sacrococcygeal. Tumor कौन सा होगा? Teratoma. So this image is a sacrococcygeal teratoma. What is this image? Sacrococcygeal teratoma. In a newborn, when it is a tumor arising from the sacrococcygeal region, it is due to abnormal migration of the primordial germ cells. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Next, if I talk about mesoderm derivative, जल्दी से. Okay, mesoderm derivative. Usually, this mesoderm, as you can see. Okay, सबसे पहले तो there is a neural tube. Following that, we have 3 derivatives of mesoderm: paraaxial mesoderm, the intermediate mesoderm, okay, the intermediate mesoderm, and the lateral plate mesoderm. ठीक है? So the paraaxial mesoderm develops into SAD. Paraaxial mesoderm develops into Start. जल्दी से. S for skeletal muscle. S for skeletal muscle. A for axial or appendicular skeleton. A for vertebra, ना? Sorry. A for axial skeleton. That means your vertebra. ठीक है. A for axial skeleton. A for axial skeleton. And D for dermis. D for dermis of the skin. ठीक है. So paraxial mesoderm derivatives are remembered by the mnemonic. Start. S for A for and D for. Then intermediate mesoderm develops into important. Very good. It develops into the urogenital sinus. Intermediate mesoderm develops into, and this urogenital sinus will further differentiate into gonads and kidneys. So gonads and kidneys are formed from which part of mesoderm? Intermediate part of mesoderm forms the urogenital sinus, which leads to formation of the gonads and kidneys, and the form from intermediate mesoderm with the derivative urogenital sinus. ठीक है. Pronephros, mesonephros, gonads, metanephros, kidney. Mesonephros, gonads, metanephros, kidney. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Important. Okay. So if I talk about lateral mesoderm derivatives, these are remembered by A, B, C. A for the appendicular skeleton. A for the, that means the upper length and the lower length. A for the appendicular skeleton. B for body cavities. B for pleural cavity, peritoneal cavity, pericardial cavity are all developed from the lateral mesoderm. And C for cardiac and smooth muscles. C for cardiac and जल्दी से. ठीक है. So lateral plate mesoderm develops into A, B, C. A for appendicular skeleton. A for B for and C for cardiac and smooth muscle. Endoderm derivatives remembered as EEG. It is as EEG. First E goes for epithelium of GIT. The epithelium of GIT is derived from the endoderm. Second E goes for epithelium of the respiratory tract. Okay, epithelium of the respiratory tract. So epithelium of respiratory tract is derived from the endoderm. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. And G goes for the glands. G goes for the which gland? जल्दी से. Gastrointestinal gland, thyroid gland, and the parathyroid gland. So जल्दी से, which glands are derived from the endoderm? Gastrointestinal gland, thyroid gland and parathyroid gland. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, याद रखना. Endoderm derivatives are remembered by the mnemonic EEG. E for epithelium of GIT. Second E for epithelium of respiratory tract, and G for glands. Which three? GIT, thyroid, parathyroid. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Important चीजें बताओ तो जल्दी. GIT में कौन सा epithelium होता है? So from the stomach till the rectum, upper part of the rectum, upper part of the anal canal. Sorry, upper part of the anal canal. It is the stratified columnar epithelium. Ciliated, non-ciliated. Cilia क्या काम करेंगे उधर? Non-ciliated. It is a non-ciliated or non-keratinized बोलेंगे. Non-keratinized stratified columnar epithelium. क्योंकि बस secretion ही करना है, तो cilia की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. ठीक है? Ciliated columnar epithelium is seen in which part of the genital system? Last December question. Ciliated columnar epithelium. उल्टा पूछा है मैंने बस. Ciliated columnar epithelium. Very good. It is the fallopian tube. Ciliated columnar epithelium is seen in which part of the uterine? Which part of the genital system? Fallopian tube. Okay. So it will help in the movement of the ova. Okay. So ciliated columnar epithelium. And with specialized, ये और एक previous year question. Anatomy से आता है. Which specialized cells are present in the fallopian tube? Specialized cells present in fallopian tubes are called as PEG cells. Specialized cells present in the fallopian tubes are called as PEG cells. PEG. PEG. ठीक है? PEG cells. PEG. ठीक है? So specialized cells in fallopian tube are called as the PEG cells. याद रखना. What is the epithelium of respiratory tract? जल्दी से. It is the pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Epithelium of respiratory tract is pseudo stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. ठीक है, no issues with this. Type 1 and type 2 pneumocyte. Repair किसका काम होता है? Type रिपेयर किसका काम होता है? टाइप 2 का. सर्फैक्टेंट प्रोडक्शन टाइप 2 का, याद रखना. ओके, रीजनरेशन कैपेसिटी टाइप 2 में होती है. ओनली फंक्शन ऑफ टाइप 1 इज एक्सचेंज. दैट्स इट. ठीक है, नो इश्यूज विद दिस एनीबॉडी. एंड टाइप 1 pneumocytes, which type of epithelium? Anybody? Alveoli are lined by. All the other part of respiratory tract are lined by pseudo stratified ciliated columnar epithelium, but alveoli are lined by. ये epithelium से क्वेश्चन आते हैं और गड़बड़ करते हैं. Simple squamous epithelium. Alveoli are lined by simple squamous epithelium for better gas exchange. Skin, upper like esophagus, oral cavity, anal canal are lined by stratified squamous epithelium. It is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Skin में it is the ciliated stratified squamous epithelium. Ciliated नहीं बोलेंगे उसको, rather better term है keratinized stratified squamous epithelium on skin. और oral cavity, esophagus and anal canal में it would be a non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है अभी. Ectoderm derivatives की मैं बात करूँ, neural crest cells. So the ectoderm usually differentiates into the neural crest cells, the neuroectoderm and the surface ectoderm. Neural crest cells can mnemonic is mosaic. M for melanocyte. ये important question है डर्मा से. melanocyte पूछा जा चुका है. melanocyte is derived from. ठीक है, so melanocytes are derived from so M कौन सा ectoderm? neural crest cells. ठीक है, M for melanocytes, O for odontoblast, O for odontoblast, O for odontoblast, S for peripheral myelination, Schwann cells, S for and Schwann cells are responsible for myelination in the peripheral nervous system. Schwann cells are responsible for myelination in the peripheral nervous system. Myelination within the central nervous system is the function of oligodendrocytes. Myelination within CNS is the function of oligodendrocytes. और micro all दूसरे glial cells और supporting cells भी बता दो. Neuron is the main cell, supporting cells are glial cells. Okay, oligodendrocytes in brain causes myelination within the CNS. Astrocytes are responsible for blood-brain barrier. Astrocytes form the blood-brain barrier. Wound healing या repair के लिए we have the astrocytes again. Wound healing or repair is by the astrocytes. ठीक है. Then lining of the ventricles is by the ependymal cells. Lining of the ventricles by the ependymal cells. याद रखना. ठीक है. And lastly, the jitter cells or the Ortega cells. These are brain macrophages known as microglial cells. Brain macrophages known as microglial cells. क्या हो गया है? कोई दिक्कत है भाई? अगर supporting cells भी आती हैं, गप्पे बाद में मार दो थोड़े. ठीक है. So as goes for the Schwann cells, which are responsible for myelination in the PNS, peripheral nervous system. A goes for the autonomic ganglia. I goes for the inner meninges. I goes for the inner meninges. कौन से होते हैं? Arachnoid and the pia mater. And these together are called as important leptomeninges. These together are called as leptomeninges. So inner meninges are arachnoid and pia mater. Together these are called as leptomeninges. And leptomeninges are derived from the neural crest cells. They are derived from the neural crest cells. Lastly, C goes for important. C goes for the chromaffin cells. And chromaffin cells are present in adrenal cortex or adrenal medulla. क्या? Chromaffin cells are present in the adrenal medulla. So a chromaffin cell tumor in the adrenal medulla is called as pheochromocytoma, which releases the catecholamines. याद रखना. Next, neuroectoderm से what develops? The nervous. So nervous system develops from the and ophtha से याद रखना है voyer mnemonic. ophtha से याद रखना है V for vitreous, O for optic nerve, I for iris and muscles. I for iris and muscles. R for retina. R for retina. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. All of these develop from the neuroectoderm. Surface ectoderm. Leg is mnemonic. Also in ophtha. Same. L for lens. L for E for epidermis. E for epidermis. And in ophtha, epithelium of cornea and conjunctiva. Epithelium of cornea and conjunctiva. And G for glands. G for glands. Which glands? All glands except these three. Okay, so glands like the sweat gland, the sebaceous gland, lacrimal gland, and the pituitary gland. Okay, so sweat glands, sebaceous glands, lacrimal glands, and pituitary glands are derived from the surface ectoderm. They are derived from the surface ectoderm. Epidermis is derived from the surface ectoderm. No issues with this, anybody? Last question तुम्हारा. If now I am all sure that the neuroectoderm usually forms a neural tube. Okay, and this neural tube is open on both the ends. There is the anterior or cranial neuropore. Okay, so anterior or cranial neuropore and the posterior or caudal neuropore. Okay, these neuropores should close. Right, this neuropore should close by birth. But if they do not close, then they can lead to neural tube defects. They cause neural tube defects. ठीक है, यही पूछा गया था. If there is failure of fusion of the closure of the anterior or the cranial neuropore, so failure of fusion of the cranial or anterior neuropore causes failure of fusion causes anencephaly. It causes anencephaly. So anencephaly is caused by failure of fusion of which neuropore? Anencephaly is caused by failure of fusion of which neuropore? Anterior neuropore, also known as cranial neuropore. Whereas failure of fusion of the caudal neuropore, failure of fusion of the caudal or the posterior neuropore will cause rachis. It will cause rachis. Okay, failure of fusion of the posterior or the caudal neuropore causes rachis. That means the spinal cord will be exposed to the surface. Okay, it can also cause spina bifida occulta या spina bifida. वो spina bifida छुपा हुआ होता है, that is called spina bifida occulta. उसमें कैसे ये करोगे? Identify. There would be a tuft of hair with dimpling of skin. ठीक है? And spina bifida जो open होता है, that is characterized by myelomeningocele or meningocele. Meningocele मतलब there would be a protrusion in a sac. ठीक है? From the sacral region. Meningocele में there would be transillumination positive or negative. Transillumination positive because the content is only meninges and meningocele. But myelomeningocele, the content is meninges plus spinal cord. Therefore, the transillumination test would be negative. याद रखना, ठीक है? And applied part is इसका. Important talking about the pharyngeal arch. ठीक है? जल्दी. तो pharyngeal arch important चीजें बताऊंगा मैं बस. तो first pharyngeal arch. Okay, so first pharyngeal arch is also known as mandibular arch. First pharyngeal arch is also known as. Second pharyngeal arch is also known as hyoid arch. ठीक है? So first pharyngeal arch develops in which bones? Maxilla, mandible, and the incus and malleus. Which bone? Maxilla, mandible, and the incus of malleus. So अगर तीन facial bones, the mandibular arch or the first pharyngeal arch develops in three facial bones: maxilla, zygoma, mandible. Which three bones? Maxilla, zygoma, mandible. ठीक है? Along with two ear ossicles, incus and which two ear ossicles? Malleus and incus. But stapes is developed from the second pharyngeal arch. This is the question. Stapes is developed from the second pharyngeal arch. No issues with this. Next, if I talk about the muscles, the muscles of mastication are derived from the first pharyngeal arch. Muscles of mastication are derived from the first pharyngeal arch. Which are the four muscles of mastication? Jaldi. First is the masseter muscle. Second is the temporalis muscle. And third and fourth are medial and lateral pterygoid muscle. Which muscle is known as mouth opener, which causes depression of mandible? Lateral pterygoid. Okay, the mouth opener is the lateral pterygoid. Mouth opener is the lateral pterygoid. ये पूछा था. Which muscle causes depression of the mandible? And the answer was lateral pterygoid muscle. The muscles of mastication develop from which are first pharyngeal arc and innervated by trigeminal nerve usually. ठीक है, the skin over there. And important artery. Superficial temporal artery. So diagonal arteritis में it also supplies the temporomandibular joint and the masticatory muscles. Therefore, there is locked jaw. Okay. Then, along with this, from first pharyngeal arc, the other muscles are mylohyoid. Mylohyoid forms the oral diaphragm. Mylohyoid muscle forms the oral diaphragm or the floor of mouth. ये question था. Which muscle forms the floor of mouth? Answer is mylohyoid. Which muscle forms the floor of mouth? Which muscle forms the floor of mouth? Mylohyoid muscle. No issues with this. याद रखना. And also anterior belly of digastric muscle. And two middle ear muscles known as tensor tympani and tensor velli palatini. Two ear muscles, that is tensor tympani and tensor velli palatini. MAT is the mnemonic for muscles. Okay? MAT is the mnemonic for muscles in the first pharyngeal arc. M for masticatory and mylohyoid. A for anterior belly of digastric, and T for tensor tympani and tensor velli palatini. Tensor velli palatini closes the Asterion tube opening. Tensor velli palatini closes the Asterion tube opening. Which nerve develops from first arc? Which nerve develops from first arc? Then second of the hyoid is into which bone? Stapes bone and the upper part of the hyoid bone. Whereas lower part of hyoid is developed from third arc. Lower part of hyoid is developed from the third arc. Okay? Facial muscles are developed from second arc. Facial muscles are developed from mastication from facial from second arc. Okay? And the muscle related to stapes is developed from the second arc. That is your stapedius muscle. So stapes bone and stapedius muscles from the second arc. Anterior belly of digastric, first arc. But posterior belly of digastric. Okay? And an important name, stylohyoid muscle. अलग सा नाम है इसीलिए stylohyoid muscle. And which nerve develops from? तो याद रखो, stapes and stapedius उनको supply करने वाली nerve, that is facial nerve. Mastication muscles को supply करने वाली nerve, that is trigeminal nerve. ठीक है? Third से कौन सी nerve? Glossopharyngeal nerve. Third arc से which nerve? Glossopharyngeal nerve. And it only supplies one muscle, that is stylopharyngeus, and therefore stylopharyngeus muscle is also developed from the third arc. 4th to 6th arc, usually they combine together. Okay, so 4th and 6th arc. 4th and 6th arc. 4th arc develops all the laryngeal cartilages and 6th arc develops the arytenoid cartilage. So total याद रख सकते हो, the 4th and 6th pharyngeal arc develops into the, so all laryngeal cartilages are developed from the 4th and all laryngeal cartilages are developed from the कितने paired कितने unpaired? 3 paired, 3 unpaired. Paired वाले जल्दी. Posterior part of vocal cord is formed by arytenoid and 2 rudimentary, corniculate and cuneiform. These are 3 paired cartilages. 3 unpaired. Largest thyroid cartilage, ring-like, cricoid cartilage, leaf-like, epiglottis. So cartilage that does not ossify. Epiglottis, elastic cartilage. ठीक है, important. So all cartilages are developed from the 4th and 6th pharyngeal arc. Which nerve develops from 4th and 6th arc? Vagus nerve. Which nerve? Vagus nerve. ठीक है. And the soft palate muscle, laryngeal and the pharyngeal muscle. So palate, pharynx, larynx. इनके तीनों की muscle develops from the 4th and the 6th pharyngeal arc. ठीक है. थोड़ा बहुत easy हो गया अभी. तो याद रखो innervation से या फिर mnemonic से तो याद रहता है. Now talking about the derivatives of the pharyngeal pouches. जल्दी से. First pharyngeal pouch develops into the कान में develop होता है पूरा. First pharyngeal pouch develops into the ear. That is Asterion tube, middle ear, and the mastoid, largest mastoid hair cell. Antrum. So mastoid, antrum. So the first pharyngeal pouch develops into 3 derivatives. First is Asterion tube. Second is middle ear. And third is mastoid, antrum. 3 pharyngeal pouch. First derivative Asterion tube. Second is middle ear. And third is mastoid, antrum. Second to fifth they obliterate, rather they form the cervical sinus. Second to fifth pharyngeal pouch, they form the cervical sinus. Second to fifth pharyngeal pouch forms the cervical sinus, and they obliterate afterwards. But if they do not obliterate afterwards, अब मैंने इसमें बताया है क्या बोलते हैं सर्जरी में. So if this cervical sinus or the 2 to 5th pharyngeal pouch does not obliterate afterwards, it remains patent and there is accumulation of fluid inside it. There will be an anterolateral neck swelling along the anterior border of sternocleidomastoid. That is what is known as a patent रह जाते हैं. That is what is known as a branchial cyst. That is what is known as a branchial cyst. याद रखो. ठीक है. Next, if I talk about Wolffian duct, that is the male genital duct, and Mullerian duct known as the female genital duct. Wolffian duct का दूसरा नाम mesonephric duct. Mullerian duct also known as paramesonephric duct. ठीक है. So male genital duct is Wolffian duct, also known as mesonephric duct. Female genital duct is Mullerian duct, also known as paramesonephric duct. So jaldi se Wolffian duct derivatives in males, it develops into the male genitalia, that is epididymis, vas deferens, also known as ductus deferens, then seminal vesicles and the prostate. Seminal vesicles and the prostate. Sperms are formed in testis के which part में? Sperms are formed in seminiferous tubules. Sperms are formed in seminiferous tubules. But sperm maturation of motility occurs in epididymis. Sperm maturation of motility occurs in epididymis. So sperm gains its motility or maturation from the epididymis. The time period for spermatogenesis is 74 days. The time period for spermatogenesis is 74 days. For next 12 days, it lives in the epididymis. For the next 12 days, it remains in the epididymis for maturation and motility. Motility and female genital. Sorry, females में pharyngeal clefts usually obliterate. Pharyngeal clefts usually obliterate. ठीक है. तो pharyngeal clefts usually obliterate. ठीक है. Not the causes. ठीक है. Pharyngeal clefts obliterate. जो बात हुई थी ना हमारी pharyngeal clefts obliterate. ठीक है. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Important. Next, यहाँ पे बात करो जल्दी से. फीमेल में Wolffian duct का क्या होता है? फीमेल में Wolffian duct का क्या होता है? What is the derivative of Wolffian duct in the female? Important यार. Sorry. It develops into the Gardner's duct. Cyst तो बाद में बनेगा अगर accumulation of fluid होता है तो. Cyst is not abnormal. Cyst is not normal. ठीक है. So remnant बोलेंगे हम या derivative बोल सकते हो. So remnant ही होगा क्योंकि obliteration के बाद remnant होता है. Development के बाद derivative होता है. ठीक है. So remnant of Wolffian duct in females is the also sometimes they will mention epiophoron and the paraophoron. Epiophoron and these are the remnants of the Wolffian duct in females, but the main remnant is Gardner's duct. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Then Mullerian duct in males. What is the remnant of Mullerian duct in males? It develops into the appendix of testis. It develops into the appendix of testis and also the prostatic utricle. Also the prostatic. So which are the two remnants of Mullerian duct in males? First is appendix of testis. Second is prostatic utricle. In females, definitely develops into the internal female genitalia. That is your fallopian tubes. Next is the uterus. Next is the cervix. And which how much part of the vagina? Upper 2/3 बोलो या 4/5 बोलो according to आपकी श्रद्धा से. ठीक है. So upper 2/3 और upper 4/5 of the vagina. ठीक है. All of these are the female genitalia derivatives from which the Mullerian duct. Remnants important है. वो शायद derivatives तो सबको पता होता है. वो remnants के बारे में ज्यादा पूछेंगे. ठीक है. So remnant of Wolffian duct in females है Gardner's duct and epiophoron and paraophoron. Remnant of Mullerian duct in males है appendix of testis and prostatic utricle. आगे जल्दी से genital ridges develop in males. Genital ridges develop into gonads. Genital ridges develop into gonads. Genital ridges develop into, that means in males it will develop into In females, it will develop into, so ovaries and testes are developed from, gonads are developed from genital folds. In males, it will develop into, in males, it will develop into, in males, it will develop into penile urethra. Females, it will develop into labia minora. In females, it will develop into, in females, it will develop into genital swellings. In males, it will develop into, in males, it will develop into, in females, it will develop into labia, in females, it will develop into labia, genital tubercle. In males, it will develop into, so genital tubercle will reach to the stimulating part of the genitalia. So genital tubercle in males develop into glans penis. Genital tubercle in males develops into, in females, it will develop into, जल्दी से, ठीक है? Gonads are developed from testes, genital ridges, ovaries, genital folds, males में, females में, penile urethra and labia minor are developed from, scrotum and labia major are developed from, genital swellings in males develop into, genital swelling in females develop into, genital tubercle develops in males into, in females into, glans penis and clitoris are developed from, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें, important चीज है. Next, if I talk about tongue, याद रखना important चीज है tongue की. So the sensation from the tongue, tongue पे question आता है बहुत बार. Muscles को हमने discuss कर ली. Main tongue muscles are innervated by the hypoglossal nerve. Okay, याद रखना. So if I talk about the sensation, so the general sensation from anterior two-third of tongue is carried by the lingual nerve. General sensation from anterior two-third, general sensation from anterior two-third, and lingual nerve is a branch of mandibular nerve. Lingual nerve is a branch of mandibular. So there was a question. Obviously, sir, a patient had some Ludwig angina type case. There was some submandibular infection at the floor of mouth, and the patient, the surgeon was resecting. Okay, so there is a high risk of injury to which nerve? So there was high risk of injury to the lingual nerve because lingual nerve is present in the floor of mouth. ठीक है, याद रखना. So general sensation from anterior two-third are carried by lingual nerve. Taste sensation from anterior two-third are carried by taste sensation. Discuss to लिया. It is carried by the chorda tympani. Anterior two-third से taste sensation, anterior two-third से taste sensation, and chorda tympani nerve is a branch of facial nerve. Chorda tympani nerve is a branch of facial nerve. Posterior one-third से general sensation and taste sensation both are carried by posterior one-third से taste as well as general sensations are carried by posterior one-third of tongue से general as well as taste sensation are carried by glossopharyngeal nerve is which cranial nerve? Ninth cranial nerve. General sensation as well as taste sensation from the posterior most part of the tongue. Also vallecula they will term it as vallecula या posterior most part of the tongue. General and taste sensation both are carried by the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is which cranial nerve? जल्दी से, ठीक है? General sensation from anterior two-third, taste sensation from anterior two-third, general and taste from posterior one-third, general and taste from posterior most. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. And there are different types of papillae होते हैं tongue में. Okay, taste buds होते हैं. Okay, circumvallate, filiform, fusiform, all of those papillae are present on the tongue surface. Then if I talk about foregut derivatives, foregut develops up to the second part of duodenum. Foregut develops up to the second part of the duodenum. ठीक है? Midgut develops from second part of duodenum till proximal two-third of transverse colon. Midgut develops from second part of duodenum till proximal two-third of transverse colon. Hindgut develops from distal one-third of transverse colon. Distal one-third of transverse colon till anal canal. Up to the anal. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, याद रखना. Foregut, the artery which supplies the important क्यों है? क्योंकि इतने पोर्शन में एक आर्टरी सप्लाई करेंगे, दूसरे वाले में दूसरी आर्टरी सप्लाई करेंगे. ठीक है? It is dependent on the embryology. ठीक है? So foregut is supplied by which artery? Important. बराबर. Foregut is supplied by the celiac trunk or the celiac artery. Foregut is supplied by the midgut is supplied by the superior mesenteric artery. Midgut is supplied by the superior mesenteric artery, and hindgut is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. celiac artery, superior and inferior mesenteric artery. All of them arise from the abdominal aorta. All of these arise from the abdominal aorta. Anteriorly, posteriorly, laterally. Anteriorly. All of these arteries arise from the abdominal aorta. On which side? Anterior side. So levels पूछे जाते हैं. Celiac artery arises at which level? Celiac artery at celiac trunk at superior mesenteric artery at superior mesenteric artery at superior mesenteric artery at superior mesenteric artery at inferior mesenteric artery at L2 या L3 superior inferior mesenteric artery at inferior mesenteric artery at L3. ठीक है. तो इधर abdominal aorta से और एक बात याद रख लो. At L2 on the lateral side there would be origin of two renal arteries. Renal arteries arise at which level? Renal arteries arise at which level? Renal arteries arise at which level? कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. celiac trunk, SMA, IMA, renal arteries, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Important याद रखो. ठीक है. Remnants of important area. So umbilical cord में बहुत सारे structures होते हैं, as all of us know, right? There is how many umbilical arteries? How many umbilical arteries? And how many umbilical veins? Which vein is left behind? Left is left behind. So left umbilical vein along with vitellointestinal duct, and this vitellointestinal duct is also called as omphallomesenteric duct. ठीक है. Along with Walton's jelly. Walton's jelly. ये question था. Walton's jelly कहाँ होती है? Walton's jelly होती है umbilical cord में. Walton's jelly. No issues with this. So umbilical artery का remnant is called as medial umbilical ligament. Umbilical artery remnant is called as umbilical artery remnant is called as umbilical artery remnant is called as medial umbilical ligament. Left umbilical vein develops into ligamentum hepatis teres. Okay, left umbilical vein develops into ligamentum hepatis teres. Remnant of left umbilical vein is known as ligamentum hepatis teres. Remnant of ductus venosus, easy. It is called as ligamentum. Remnant of ductus venosus is called as ligamentum. Ductus arteriosus का remnant is called as ligamentum. It is called as ligamentum. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. If there is patent ductus arteriosus, it is called as PDA. Right? Important. A child presents with partial patent vitellointestinal duct. A child presents with partial patent vitellointestinal duct. Childhood में आएगा तुम्हारे साथ, तुम्हारे पास bleeding along with stools, all of these features देखें. So partial. So as I told you, vitellointestinal duct or the omphallomesenteric duct is the abnormal connection between the midgut and the, that is large intestine, and the umbilicus. ठीक है, it obliterates after birth. But if some part of it is left behind, तो क्या होगा? क्या होगा large intestine में? Small intestine, large intestine में? Diverticulum. So partial patent vitellointestinal duct causes partial patent vitellointestinal duct causes. कितने गायब थे सर्जरी में? कितने लोग गायब थे सर्जरी वाले सेशन में? तो partial patent vitellointestinal duct leads to Meckel's diverticulum. Partial patent vitellointestinal duct leads to Meckel's diverticulum. Complete patency of vitellointestinal duct, मतलब कुछ भी obliterate नहीं हुआ. ठीक है? तो all the vitellointestinal duct is patent. ठीक है? Then there would be presence of feces at the umbilicus. December का question. If the child presents with feces of umbilicus, then that is suggest your complete patency of vitellointestinal duct. That is what is called as vitelline fistula. That is called as vitelline fistula. It is due to complete patency of the vitellointestinal duct. No issues with this. Complete patency. Okay? Then if there is urine at the umbilicus, so abnormal connection before birth between the bladder and umbilicus is known as the, तो ये भी content होता है umbilical cord का. It is known as allantois. The remnant of allantois is known as urachus. Remnant of allantois is known as called as urachus. But this urachus obliterates after birth. ठीक है? Urachus obliterates after birth. But if this urachus does not obliterate at the birth, then there will be excretion of urine at the umbilicus. And if a child presents to you with urine at the umbilicus, then definitely it is due to the urachus fistula. Then it is due to urachus. No issues with this. याद हो गया? Complete patency of vitreointestinal duct causes vitelline fistula. And child is present with feces at umbilicus. Complete patency of urachus will lead to urachus fistula. And child will present with urine at the umbilicus. Partial causes nectal diverticulum. No issues with this, anybody? Next, please tell me, what is this? This is a cleft palate. This is a cleft palate. It is due to failure of fusion of which two processes? It is due to failure of fusion of. It is due to failure of fusion of the maxillary process with the frontonasal process. Maxillary process with the. So cleft palate is due to failure of fusion of which two processes? Maxillary and the frontonasal process. Okay, maxillary and the frontonasal process. This one, the next one is what? This one is a cleft lip. This one is a cleft lip. Okay, so cleft lip is due to failure of fusion of. It is due to failure of fusion of. Very good, bolo. Failure of fusion of two maxillary processes. It is due to failure of fusion of two medial nasal process. Okay, it is due to failure of fusion of the two medial nasal process. Okay, ठीक है. No issues with this. It is due to failure of fusion of the two medial nasal process. No issues with this, anybody? Next, ये X-ray बताओ. So here the patient is having complaints of dysphagia, and you can see the esophagus, barium swallow करा हमने, and the esophagus is compressed at a position, and it is usually at the arc of the aorta. esophageal atresia में तो बनेगी नहीं ना, contrast नीचे जाएगा, इसमें contrast जा रहा है, but it is compressed. Classical condition. Dysphagia lusoria, and dysphagia lusoria is due to abnormal artery. Which abnormal artery? Aberrant, right or left? Aberrant right subclavian artery. Dysphagia lusoria develops due to aberrant right subclavian artery. So this abnormal right subclavian artery will compress the esophagus, causing dysphagia lusoria. Classical नाम है तो आता है बात, ठीक है? So dysphagia lusoria is due to which artery? Aberrant right subclavian artery. Dysphagia lusoria is due to which artery? Aberrant right subclavian artery. Aberrant right subclavian artery causes which condition? Dysphagia lusoria. No issues with this. If I talk about joints, structural classification of joints जो है, we have fixed or immovable joints, and fixed or immovable joints are called as fibrous joints. Okay, gum process when it is between the tooth and the socket. Okay, tooth and the socket. These are called as gum process. Second are the sutures. Sutures are present between the cranial bones. Sutures are present between the cranial bones. And these are called as syndesmoses. Syndesmoses are due to presence of a interosseous membrane. Syndesmoses are due to presence of a interosseous membrane. These are present where? Very good. It is the middle radioulnar joint. Which joint? Middle radioulnar joint. And which tibiofibular? Superior nahi? Superior and inferior tibiofibular joint. Superior and inferior tibiofibular joint. So syndesmosis कहाँ का मिलता है जल्दी से? Syndesmosis is due to presence of a interosseous membrane. दो bones के बीच में क्या होगा? Membrane. Which joints are examples of syndesmosis? First is the middle radioulnar joint, and second is the superior and inferior tibiofibular joint. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, if I talk about cartilaginous joints, these can be primary cartilaginous joints, which are called as synchondroses. Primary cartilaginous joints are called as synchondroses, and secondary cartilaginous joints are called as symphysis. Secondary cartilaginous joints are called as symphysis. Primary cartilaginous joints are called as synchondroses. Example दे दो एक जल्दी. First, costosternal joint. Okay. First क्या हुआ? क्या? Epiphysis and diaphysis के बीच में. Very good. So this primary cartilaginous joint will ossify afterwards. ठीक है? So it is the first costosternal joint. Rib and sternum के बीच में. And it is also the metaphysis. That is the between epiphysis and diaphysis. It is also an example of primary cartilaginous joint, also called as synchondrosis. Symphysis. The classical example is pubic symphysis. It is a permanent one. It is already ossified. ठीक है? Next, if I talk about synovial joints are also called as diarthrosis. Synovial joints are also called as diarthrosis. Cartilaginous joints are called as amphiarthrosis. Cartilaginous joints are called as, and fibrous joints are called as synarthrosis. No issues with this. Synovial joints, as we know, they are of 6 types. Okay. The first is the gliding joint. When one bone glides over the other, these are also called as gliding joints. Are also called as gliding joints. Are also called as. So these are the intercarpal joint. These are the intercarpal joint. So the intertarsal joint. Intertarsal joint. Second is the hinge joint. Hinge joint means the darwaza जैसे एक ही तरफ खुलता है. So only one directional movement is possible. Unidirectional movement is possible. This would be which joint? Elbow joint, ankle joint. Okay, which joint? Elbow joint, ankle joint, and the interphalangeal joint. And the interphalangeal joint. याद रखना, ठीक है? So elbow joint, ankle joint, and the interphalangeal joint. So which type of joint? Hinge joint, one directional movement. Next is the pivot joint. Next is the pivot joint between the two bones. Okay, so one bone, okay, one structure of bone articulates with the other structure. And the classical example is pivot, atlantoaxial joint. Atlanto, where the dens of the axis articulates with the notch of the atlas. So the first vertebral joint is known as the atlantoaxial joint. It is which type of joint? Pivot joint. It is which type of joint? Pivot joint. Next, condyloid joint. Condyloid joint is also called as condylar joint, yeah, ellipsoid joint. Condyloid joint is also called as condyloid joint is also called as, and the classical example would be, so concave or convex surface hoga, that is what is called as the condyloid joint. So the classical example is the knee joint. Okay, classical example is the knee joint. Concave or convex surface na jahan bhi ho. Metacarpophalangeal joints are also concave or convex joint. That means condyloid or ellipsoid joint. Saddle joint also called as sellar joint. Saddle joint also called as sellar joint. And the classical example is first carpometacarpal joint. The classical example is first carpometacarpal joint. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Last is the ball and socket joint. When the head articulates with the cavity. कौन से? Shoulder and the hip joint. Shoulder and the, जल्दी से बता दो. ये क्वेश्चन था. 3 ear ossicles बताएं. Malleus, incus, stapes. ठीक है? So inguido-malleolar joint is and the inguido-malleolar joint ही बोलो और inguido-stapedial joint is inguido-stapedial joint is. जल्दी बताओ. Inguido-malleolar joint is saddle joint. Inguido-malleolar joint is and inguido-stapedial joint is कोई दिक्कत नहीं है इसमें. Next, if I talk about this one, क्या दिख रहा है? Femoral sheath. So femoral sheath is nothing but the tendon sheath which forms a covering on the upper surface of these vessels and the nerves. ठीक है? So this is the femoral sheath. ठीक है? And here you can see a femoral sheath usually has 3 compartments. Okay? The lateral compartment is known as the arterial compartment because from lateral compartment what passes? The femoral artery along with femoral branch of the genitofemoral nerve. Which 2 structures pass from the lateral compartment? Femoral artery along with femoral branch of genitofemoral nerve. Then intermediate compartment is the venous compartment. What passes? Femoral vein. Okay, intermediate is femoral vein. Okay, and lastly, AVN याद रखो. Artery, veins and nodes. ठीक है? From lateral to medial. Medial compartment में it is the lymph nodes, and these lymph nodes are called as lymph nodes of Cloquet or lymph nodes of Rosenmuller. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Next, what is this? This is the adductor canal. Adductor canal is also called as Hunter's canal. Adductor canal is also called as Hunter's canal. ठीक है? तो याद रखना important चीज है. What are the contents of adductor canal? It is on the medial aspect of the thigh. ठीक है? So the contents of adductor canal. First is the femoral artery. Second is the femoral. So which artery? Femoral artery. Which vein? Femoral vein. Which nerve? Saphenous nerve. Which nerve? Saphenous nerve. And again one nerve to vastus medialis. Vastus medialis is one part of which muscle? Quadriceps femoris. Quadriceps femoris has 4 parts. vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and the rectus femoris. Anterior compartment leg की muscle है, याद रखो यार, important है, ठीक है? So here you can see usually the medial border is formed by the adductor, medial border formed by adductor, medial border formed by adductor, lateral border formed by vastus medialis, lateral border formed by vastus medialis, and posterior border formed by sartorius muscle. Longest muscle of body is sartorius. Longest muscle of body is, and therefore it is also called as Taylor's muscle. Sartorius is also called as the different types of epiphyses. Pressure epiphyses are the ones which will transmit the pressure from one bone to another, and they take part in joint formation. The pressure epiphyses would be the head of femur or the head of humerus, right? Then near the pressure epiphyses, you can find some other epiphyses or the head of the bone which are due to traction or pull of a muscle, and these are called as traction epiphyses. What are the classical examples of traction epiphyses? Lesser and greater trochanters of femur, lesser and greater trochanters of femur, and lesser and greater tubercles of humerus, lesser and greater tubercles of. So tubercles and trochanters are example of. Tubercles and trochanters are example of. Then atavestic epiphyses. Atavestic epiphyses का मतलब होता है is a separate bone but finally fuses with the main bone. That is what is the atavestic epiphyses. Two atavestic epiphyses. First is the coracoid process of scapula. First is the coracoid process of scapula, and second is the posterior tubercle of talus. Second is the posterior tubercle of talus. ये question था. Posterior tubercle of talus is also called as os trigonum. Posterior tubercle of talus is also called as os trigonum. And aberrant epiphysis, which is the unusual or rare bone. The aberrant epiphysis is the head of first metacarpal. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Aberrant epiphysis. Important बात है मैं पहले कर रहा हूँ. So, if there is injury to the upper trunk of the brachial plexus, it is known as injury to the upper trunk of brachial plexus causes abscesses due to injury to which trunk of brachial plexus? Nerve roots बताओ. C5, C6. Nerve root of C5. What is the attitude of limb? Attitude of limb is called as adducted, internally rotated, and flexion at the wrist. This is called as which deformity? Waiter tip deformity. Which deformity? Waiter tip deformity. Also known as policeman tip deformity. Also known as policeman tip deformity. No issues with this? Then you can see if a patient is pressing against the wall and there is a bending of scapula, it is due to injury to which nerve? It is injury to the long thoracic nerve. Long thoracic nerve is also called as nerve of. It is nerve of, and it innervates which muscle? It innervates which muscle? It innervates which muscle? The rectus anterior muscle. Okay? Then you can see over here, a person is having this kind of deformity. So this partial claw दिख रहा तुम्हें? मेरे को तो partial claw नहीं दिख रहा. Here the patient is trying to close the hand, but is not able to close it properly. This is called as hand of benediction. This is called as hand of benediction. Also known as Pope's hand. Also known as so Pope ऐसे आशीर्वाद देते हैं, ठीक है? And it is due also known as the ape नहीं है यार. It is also known as the Pope's hand or the hand of benediction. Pope's hand or hand of benediction. ठीक है? It is due to injury to the median nerve injuries causes which type of hand? Benediction or median injury causes which type of hand? Benediction or Pope's hand. Ape hand क्या होता है? Ape thumb deformity होती है, ठीक है? तो ape thumb deformity is due to injury to the ape thumb deformity is due to injury to the so opposition would not be possible. The thumb would be adduction. The thumb would be because all the thenar muscles are innervated by median nerve. All thenar muscles are innervated by except for adductor pollicis. Except for adductor pollicis, which is innervated by ulnar nerve. Adductor pollicis is innervated by. Therefore, in median nerve injury, the thumb would lie adduction, and this is called as which deformity? Ape thumb deformity. Next one, here you can see the patient is not able to open the hand properly. This is what is known as the claw hand. Partial claw hand due to partial claw hand due to partial claw hand due to and complete claw hand due to complete claw hand due to ulnar ulnar plus complete claw and due to ulnar plus complete claw and due to ulnar plus median nerve injury. No issues with this. Then next, wrist drop is due to क्या हो गया भाई? Benediction is this. Benediction की तरफ दिख रहा है तो usually ये एक ऑप्शन में ना दे या फिर you need to figure it out. ठीक है? If the patient is trying to close the hand but the patient is not able to close the hand, this is what is called as the hand of benediction or the Pope's hand. ठीक है? The patient is not able to close the hand properly. ठीक है? Whereas if the patient is trying to open the hand and the last two fingers are not able to open, this is what is a partial claw hand. ठीक है? अब यार देना तो चाहिए because they would make it simpler to you. ठीक है? They are giving benediction on hand or Pope's hand, then they will definitely make simpler to you. Either they'll give you a case and they will tell that the patient is not able to open the hand, not able to close the hand. ठीक है? याद रखना. Then which मैं टेस्ट के नाम पूछ रहा हूँ, जल्दी से बताना. Igawa test is done for. Igawa test when the patient is asked to raise the finger and move it sideways. Igawa test is done for ulnar nerve. Igawa test is for sorry, pointing index sign is for pointing index sign median nerve. Pointing index sign median nerve. Balance test median nerve. Balance test sorry, reverse balance test नहीं, balance test ही बोलते यार. Balance test is reverse balance test for diabetic cheroarthropathy. Reverse balance test for diabetic cheroarthropathy. No issues with this anybody? ये important है, याद रख लेना सब. Then a patient is asked to hold a card or a book or card test for ulnar nerve. So he is asked to hold a book or a card by adduction of the thumb. But he is not able to hold it by adduction, he holds it by flexion. This is what is called as the Fromm's test. So Fromm's test is for the कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, जल्दी से आगे. ठीक है? Anatomical snuff box is usually on the medial lateral side. ठीक है? Then medial border is formed by the extensor pollicis longus. Medial border by the extensor pollicis longus. Lateral border by the abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. Lateral border by the abductor pollicis longus and by the extensor pollicis brevis. The floor is formed by two bones, scaphoid and trapezium. And forms the floor of anatomical snuff box. Content of snuff box is and snuff box could be damaged in cases of scaphoid fracture. No issues with this. Important is snuff box. ठीक है, याद रखना. Lower trunk if damaged in brachial plexus, it causes Klumpke's palsy, and Klumpke's palsy will lead to which deformity? It causes a partial claw hand. Klumpke's palsy causes a then important musculocutaneous nerve का nerve root. Important nerve root पूछ रहा होगा. Musculocutaneous nerve का nerve root C5, C6, C7. C5, C6, C7. Ulnar nerve का nerve root C7, C8, C1. Ulnar nerve का nerve root C7, C8, C1. Brachial plexus is C5 to D1. Median radial nerve C5 to D1. कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, ठीक है. So either we will complete the session. Okay. मैं ऑनलाइन कर ले, कितना रह गया? ज़्यादा सर. ज़्यादा ऑनलाइन जाएगा फिर तो. ऑनलाइन से बड़ा. हाँ. So next बाकी कंप्लीट करना चाहते हो नहीं करना? नहीं करना. खाली बैठे कर लिया. 15 मिनट बाद 5:15 को मैं सेशन स्टार्ट करता हूँ. ऑनलाइन देख लेना. टीवी का सेशन होगा अगर बैच ना हो, अगर मेडुलरी क्लास ऑनलाइन कर दो. वाह ऐसा करते ना यार. तेरा क्वेश्चन क्या है? इसके बाद अभी ऑनलाइन कर रहे थे यार. क्या दिक्कत है? चाय पी लो, ऑनलाइन कर लो.
वहीं कर लो, ऑफिस में घर है, ऑफिस में ऑफलाइन कर लो, वहीं बैठ जाओ आसपास के सीट के आसपास,
वहां पे बैठ जाओ।
हाँ
जिसको बैठ जाओ वहीं पे, जिसको बस ऑफलाइन चाहिए वो ऑफिस में बैठ जाओ साथ में, ठीक है?
ऑफिस में आ जाओ, सामने चेयर लगा लो और क्या, बैठ जाओ।
कोई दिक्कत नहीं, चलो।
So how are things going?
5:20